Kyrou buries it on a great pass from Shen. 4 seconds to go. In the middle of the ice, Sundqvist is there, clears it out, and bring out the Zamboni. A gutsy 3-2 win over the Lightning. They're 2-0 on the homestand. 7-6 overall. And a big win on home ice tonight. 3-2.
Alex, I don't know what to say about this team anymore. I don't know. I don't think this is a great team, and I don't care. I enjoy watching them, and you can say a lot about these Blues. You can't say one thing about them any longer. No longer can you question their toughness. Whether that's physical or mental, there's no questioning this particular group's toughness on the ice. Because they've come back, don't check my math on this, Alex, 47 times so far this year.
Yeah, math checks out. They played 13 games.
13 games of the season, they've come back 47 different times. They do not care what the situation calls for. They're going to go out there and just keep playing. And it sounds so simple, and it's something that this team has not done over the past 2 years. They get down, and they are done. They look to the sky. They get down on themselves after they miss a shot. They scream and moan after they end up getting a penalty called on them. Not this year. They have lost 6 games. They've lost almost as often as they've won. But what they don't do is feel sorry for themselves. They had one game where Braden Shin came out afterwards and said, we were too soft tonight. Beyond that, dude, this team has basically been in every single game they've played so far this year. I enjoy watching them. That game last night, that's not the same Tampa Bay team that we've come to know as a cup contender every single season. I get that. They've still got some pretty damn good players over there, though. And you're without like half of your roster right now with injuries. We'll get to Dylan Holloway here in just a moment. Scary scene last night at Enterprise. That was one of those gritty types of performances. I wasn't sure the Blues had this many of those in them at this point in the season. It gives me a lot of hope of what they can continue to be, even with all of the injuries that are plaguing them right now.
You can question this team's talent all you want. Do they have the 40-goal scorer? Do they have the number one centerman? Do they have an offense that can go from top to bottom? You can do all of that questioning like BK does with this tone. What you are no longer able to question is this team's ability to stay tough, physically and mentally. You're right. Last season, 2 seasons ago, every single time that one little thing would go wrong, and I'm talking as a matter of a guy slipping in his own end and the puck just bouncing off of his foot and going into his own net. That small would ruin the entire game. Something could happen 3 seconds into the first period, and you just knew the game was over.
Yep.
There has not been a moment this season, with the exception of the Ottawa Senators game, that I looked at it and said, they have no shot of coming back in this game. And that says an awful lot about this team, because you've played 13 games. You were blown out in 2 of them. And I don't even know if you can consider Montreal a blowout, but if you want to, go for it. Every single time this team has had the ability to come back and has forced their way back into the games. And I thought last night was just another feather in their cap, because you talk about adversity, not so much of an injury that takes place prior to a game where the previous night he's unavailable, but in game. And to step back out on the ice and just weather the storm of the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first period and then come out and push back. And that's been the biggest thing for this Blues team. It's their play, but it's their ability to push back against the opposition. Because every time last season, they got bullied around a lot. Post-whistle, you'd see guys take a couple of extra hacks at Jordan Binnington. You'd see a player get shoved down, and everybody would just, maybe next time we'll take care of it. Not this one. Last night in the third period, you were up by 2 goals on Tampa Bay. Nick Paul for Tampa Bay. I forget who he shoved. I thought it was Oscar Sundqvist, but there was a scrum no matter what. And the moment he even looked at a Blues player, there were 5 of those guys that jumped in immediately. That's camaraderie. And you're still building a lot of areas. You're still developing some of these younger players. What does a Bolduc look like? You don't even have Dvorsky or Snuggerud. Thomas is hurt. Broberg's hurt. But one thing that you can figure out now is how tough you can be. And I think when you figure that out as a team, now you can really start building where you're at. I mean, 13 games in, they have the most wins of a 1-goal game so far in the NHL. They've got 5 of them.
And I don't know if that's sustainable, but they're doing it. And so I don't projecting forward, don't care. Let's talk about what has happened. That's amazing. And it speaks to their goaltending. It speaks to their mental toughness. It speaks to their ability to come back. I can't imagine. I haven't looked at the numbers, Alex, but I have to imagine they're up there in the rankings and come from behind wins so far this year as well. What they have done has been highly impressive, and it goes back to the offseason. Because think about the depth that they were able to add, Alex. The bottom six, we got somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line that said, guys, this bottom six is elite right now. I don't know if it's elite, but it's really damn good. And it's really good despite having multiple players from that bottom six out right now due to injury. I mean, you think about Radek Faksa and what he's been able to bring to you. A little bit of bite to the lineup that they were missing. Just a solid, stable third or fourth line center. They've been missing that for a while, dude, and it's really nice to have it when you can have it night in, night out. You look at what Sonny has brought to the lineup again, now that he is healthy. He was really good last night. They needed that. Some speed on the wings. Walker, Texier, what they've been able to bring to this lineup. Bolduc, I do think he is a player that I'm starting to see more and more. I like what you're seeing from him. He's not playing a ton, but he's a good player. They have so many different pieces that they've been able to add to the mix that change the outlook and change the feel of the team. I want to get to one other, Alex, and I want to ask you about him. Ryan Suter. This guy's 100 years old. He played 25 minutes last night of ice time. He stood a dude up at the blue line, and I loved the way that Jamie described it. He said, that's an old school hit. There is nothing dirty about it. There is no reason for anybody to be upset about it. But that is not a hit that you see in today's game very often. And Suter just stood the guy up and boom, ended the play right there. Took the body away instead of trying to like stick handle. No. Let's go through the guy. That's what Suter decided in that moment in time. And he's a guy that will take all of the hacks necessary after a play is over to try to draw a penalty. He's somebody that's going to be standing in front of the net, clearing out the space. Suter is not perfect. He doesn't skate the way that you'd maybe want a top pair defenseman to skate. But this is a guy that has brought all of the things on the ice that you've been looking for and off of the ice with the leadership stuff. Can't ask for anything more than what he's been able to bring so far. He leads the team right now in plus minus.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I mean, and again, think back to the narrative of Ryan Suter when he was signed, because we saw it on the Air Comfort Service text line. You were told it by a lot of people. He's a bad guy. He's not a good player to have around your locker room. He's selfish. He's not good for your young players. Look at how this team has performed in 13 games with Ryan Suter in the lineup. Again, I'll go back to reference the third period last night. That dude was leading the charge of reacting to a Tampa Bay Lightning player that kind of pushed your player around. Ryan Suter, to me, and at the time he was signed, I went back to the 2011-2012 season. When the Blues brought in Jason Arnott and Jamie Langenbrunner, they were bringing in veterans who had experience of winning. Both of those guys were 36 years old. And they said, we need guys who understand how to win in the NHL to bring that toughness to our locker room. You had Oshie, you had Shattenkirk, Petro, Perron. All these guys were 25 years and younger. They didn't know how to win. You bring in a Ryan Suter, and there's no coincidence your defense has locked things down.
Yep.
You've been better in one-goal games this season. And your all-around attitude is significantly different. That's leadership. And I know people make a lot of it from these last couple of years of like, what does this look like? And how much does leadership really matter? You don't have talent. Some of that can be true. But if you get a guy who has played over 1,400 games, who has seen it all, and you plug him into a locker room that says, hey, we need to figure out how to be tougher. We need to figure out how to handle moments better than what we have in the past. That's Ryan Suter. I mean, he spoke multiple times after losses that says, hey, we got to be better. We need to be more direct. And what do? The following night, they're more direct. They're better with the puck.
And I think a lot of it is just he's a better player, too. Like, all of what you're saying about like the leadership side of things, that's all important. I'm not trying to diminish it. What really matters, what it ends up coming down to is this dude's playing 25 minutes a night right now, and he's eating those minutes at a high level. He's playing well. You have a top pair defenseman in Ryan Suter right now, which is something you've been severely lacking over the last few seasons. So even if he brought none of what you're talking about, Alex, and he does, it would still be worth it, and he would have been a massive upgrade over what you've had because of what he's just doing on the ice. So whether you care about the leadership side of things or don't, or you're somewhere in between, Ryan Suter's been a massive upgrade for this team, and he's bringing everything they could have asked for in it.
And he's making Colton Parayko better, too. And I always have thought that Colton Parayko is a top pair defenseman that doesn't get enough credit. But Ryan Suter and Colton Parayko are legit a shutdown pair right now. Every time they step on the ice, they go up against the other team's top line. I know Kucherov had 2 assists last night, but you know how many goals that line scored? 0. So I mean, Ryan Suter is a +8 right now. And I know plus-minus, it's a fickle number that some people don't like, some people do like. But here are the guys that have a better plus-minus than him right now in the National Hockey League. Dmitry Orlov, Alex Pietrangelo, Gustav Forsling, John Carlson, Braden McNabb. All these guys are considered top pair defensemen. And Ryan Suter, oh, by the way, is trumping a lot of these guys with like 2 or 3 minutes extra of average time per game.
Yeah. He's your top pair defenseman moving forward until proven otherwise.
Yeah. Leddy comes back.
Returns, he's your third pair defenseman.
Yep.
Or for the time being, if he comes back prior to Broberg, he can play on that second pair for you. You bump down P.O. Joseph. But when you are fully healthy, Suter, it's a Wally Pipp situation, man. I'm sorry. Suter said all along, I'm better than some of these guys that are getting more ice time than me. That's always been the knock on him. I don't know how that's a knock, but it's a knock apparently in the NHL. He's right. He's better than all these other dudes, man. I'm sorry. He's just better. He gives them a better chance to win when he's on the ice for 24 minutes. That may change. He's 39 years old. There may come a point in time in which he is not your best option, but as of today, he really is.
Yep. He told us that. He told us, he's like, look, I've just never been afraid in a locker room to look at somebody and say, I can do your job better than you. And essentially, he looked at Nick Leddy. Now, Nick Leddy was injured, but he said, I can do this job better. And he has taken it and he has run with it, and there's no touching that.
All right, last thing we want to get to is the scene from last night at Enterprise Center. Alex, you were there. I was watching on TV. T-Bone, I know you were as well. That was the type of thing that you never hope to see, and it was almost... I didn't know what was going on. So what I'm referencing is Dylan Holloway, when he was hit by the puck in the neck, ends up finishing his shift. And that's what made this so different, Alex, than some of the other things that we've seen at with the Blues before, whether you go back all the way to Pronger or to the Jay Bouwmeester situation. Something that happened, and then a minute playing on the ice, and then he goes back down to the bench, and then you realize something has taken place. There's a lot of confusion that was happening there. Watching on TV, it was horrifying because you see Ray Burley holding his neck. So the first thing that came to mind for me is, oh, no, he got cut. But there's no blood anywhere, and you would have assumed that you would have seen that, and then you would have thought, okay, they're immediately going to take him to the locker room to get things taken care of if that was the case. Obviously, that wasn't what happened here. We don't have a lot of updates other than that he's apparently doing okay. That's pretty much it. But, Alex, you were in the arena last night. What was the experience like from your perspective? Because that's different than what a lot of us had watching on television.
Yeah, scary. I mean, the play happened. I saw him take the puck, what I just assumed was off the shoulder. But then when they did the slow-mo of it, you saw where it hit, and it was in his neck region. But I made nothing of it because he went and played another 1:10. He went down, he forechecked. Yeah, he got the puck back, he kept the play alive, and then he went to the bench. But there was a penalty that was called, so a whistle took place. And so at that time, it's a TV timeout, and you're thinking, okay, well, not much going on here, and so you look away. But then I'm listening to Kerbs and Joe, and it's like, uh-oh, and you look back, and you just saw the crowd. Now, I saw the same thing you did with Ray Burley holding his neck, and I'm thinking, okay, did he get cut somewhere? You're looking around for blood. There was nothing. And then you just saw Justin Falk yank one of the medical people onto the ice. You saw like 7 or 8 different team doctors coming onto the bench. And you're like, what is going on? Because at the same time, we were right next to the booth where the front office sits. So Doug Armstrong, Al McKenna, Scott Mellenby. And at that time, you see a ton of those guys run out of the booth. And then once they brought the stretcher out onto the bench, it's like, what is taking place right now? And you watch the replay so many different times, and there was nothing that showed what took place other than everybody trying to hold him up, Ray Burley holding onto his neck. And then when they laid him down on the bench, that's when you're like, man, this is a lot more serious than what we originally thought. Now, the good news was, we got reports as the game went on, much like people did on social media, that he was in the ambulance, he was breathing under his own ability, and they got him to the hospital, and everything was fine. But in the moment, and I remember doing the Jay Bouwmeester game and watching him collapse on the bench, that was even scarier because you were there in person and you saw everything take place, and there was really no answers of what happened.
It's we're hopeful that he's going to be all right. He's not skating today. Luke Korak just tweeted out the lines. He's not on the ice as expected. Nobody thought he was necessarily going to be, but just as an update, not on the ice today. We'll see if we get any update after practice. We're hoping that will be the case, but we'll certainly pass along anything that we hear as we get it here on BK and Ferrario. Just a quick update on the lines. Top line remains Booch. A little bit of a shift here. Neighbors, Booch, and Kapanen is your top line today at morning skate. Saad, Shen, and Kyrou is your second line. Torpo, Foxa, and Walker is your third line. And then Texier, Sundqvist, and Bolduc is your fourth line today. Matthew Joseph is skating, but as an extra. So it looks like he's working his way back, which is great news for the Blues, but it might still be a little bit. So those are your morning skate lines today. We'll certainly get into that as we go along here on BK and Ferrario. If you guys want to check us out, youtube.com/101ESPN STL is the place to do so. You can get involved in the show at 314-399-9646. Coming up next, what did we learn from the first college football playoff rankings that were revealed last night? I know one thing, the Missouri Tigers were involved with it, which makes it good in my book. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Coming up in about 30 minutes or so, we'll get into questions and answers. So if you guys have any questions, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We've already had a few. I'm frankly not interested in answering later on today. So if you've got any sports questions, we'll get to those coming up at
Mr. Politics doesn't want to answer questions off the text line?
I'm not taking any questions at this time.
First day you've been quiet on your politics in a while.
First day I haven't heard BK say, I don't mean to get political, but...
I do want to talk about the sports betting thing. We'll get into that at 11:45, but otherwise...
Sure, it'll just be the
we'll
sports betting
thing. We'll save all the other
thing.
takes for our politics podcast. You can find that wherever, of course, your podcasts.
Yeah. And we'll get the Dad Pod episode in there. I'm sure we're going to get a new one of those soon.
Yeah, I figured at the end of the Dad Pod, we could talk about how, as dads, we're feeling about politics nowadays. So it'll be good, right?
Honestly, that's a great idea.
All right, so the first college football playoff rankings were revealed yesterday. The AP poll doesn't matter. The coaches poll doesn't matter. What matters nowadays is the college football playoff rankings. And even then, the degree to which these rankings today matter are minimal. I mean, there's so much can change between now and the end of the regular season that this is just a guideline on, okay, if you're in the top 12 today, you effectively control your own destiny. So that's nice to know as a fan. And for a team like Boise State, for example, where were they going to rank? Were they going to be ahead of somebody like Texas A&M, which has a greater strength of schedule, but has 2 losses already on the season? What about SMU? Where would they belong on a list like this? Are they going to be behind any 2-loss teams? The answer was yes, 1. So there are some teams that got important answers. Notre Dame, worst loss of anybody in the top 12 to 15, and yet they're ranked in the top 10. Alex, what was your biggest takeaway from the initial rankings reveal, which had Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia as your top 3?
That didn't surprise me, although Ohio State's still a little bit like, do I really believe they're one of those top teams? But it's hard to argue with it. I guess the initial takeaway was looking at the teams on here and how many are still in competition for a playoff spot. Like, I was reading, I think it was Jerry Palm that was putting something out there earlier today about how, like, you're not going to see a 3-loss team get into the college football playoffs, which now you're starting to get to the point where you've got the elimination factor coming into play, like LSU and Alabama this weekend. If one of those, because Alabama's right now in one of those playoff spots, Alabama loses a game, LSU picks one. Now you're talking about Alabama being eliminated and LSU popping up there. So you just go through that list with LSU, with Texas A&M, with Ole Miss. Like, these are all 2-loss teams that if they win out, now you're discussing, are they going to be in one of these spots? So this really creates the intrigue in terms of how do teams look down the stretch, because a 3-loss team is not going to be making this postseason. But then you're going through, like, a lot of these that only have 1 loss. Are there more teams in a playoff spot than we're giving enough credit for right
T-Bone,
now?
I want to get to yours, but I have something that kind of relates to that. I think they rewarded teams for big wins more than they docked them for bad losses. I think that's something that we're seeing from these initial rankings as well.
Notre Dame.
Like, exactly. Notre Dame has a terrible loss on its resume, and yet they beat Texas A&M on the road. That's a huge win. Texas A&M right now is ranked number 14 in the country, and prior to last week, I thought we're a legit top 5 to 7 team in the country, and they bleeped the bed. But other than that, they've been really good so far this year. You look at a team like Georgia, for example, right? They have a loss on their resume, yes, and it's not a great one. Alabama's a good team, though. But they beat Texas. That's a huge win. They did so on the road, and so they're rewarded by being all the way up at number 3 in the rankings. So I think that was something that I took away from this. A bad loss, it's not good for you, obviously. Look at Mizzou, right? They've been blown out multiple times this season, but they're still in the top 25 somehow.
Boo.
They're rewarding teams for those big victories, and I hope that they continue to do that long term, because in my opinion, that will incentivize teams to continue to play these high-level non-con games. It incentivizes teams to say, okay, if we lose one of those non-con games to a really quality opponent, it's not going to dock us that much, but the potential for a win could really boost us as we continue along here during the regular season.
Yeah, and mine kind of ties into the win totals, because I look at this and I go, man, if you're in the SEC or you're in the Big Ten, you've got room for a 2-loss team. You know, like Alabama being in at number 11. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it goes to show you that you've got Alabama at 11, LSU with 2 losses at 15, Ole Miss ahead at 16 with 2 losses as well, and A&M as well at 14 at 7-2. Yep. I mentioned all 3 of those teams in the SEC. Why? Because they're ahead of a bunch of 1-loss teams from the Big 12.
Iowa State, Pittsburgh,
and
Washington
ACC.
State, all have 1 loss.
And the Pac-2. But that right there tells me, and I don't disagree with this at all, because you can watch the conferences, and when you watch some of these conference games, the SEC and Big Ten are loaded this year. Last year, the Pac-12 was unbelievably deep. This year, it's the SEC, it's the Big Ten. Big Ten probably more top-heavy than anything else, but it's got some really good top-heavy teams.
They flipped. Last year, I felt like the Big Ten was deeper. This year, I feel like the SEC is deeper. The top heaviness has gone over to the Big Ten.
And because of that, if you are an SEC team with 2 losses, you still got the wiggle room, right? If you're Alabama, I thought there was a little question of, okay, if you have 2 losses, where will you fall in these rankings? Will they put an Iowa State or a Pitt or a Kansas State potentially ahead of you, a Washington State potentially ahead of you? And the answer is no. They're looking at the conferences and they're seeing what we're seeing, which is a good thing for the SEC and Big Ten teams. Alabama, you can get in with 2 losses. If you're Ole Miss, LSU, hey, even though you're not in it right now, you can have 2 losses. And this is especially good for teams like Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, who currently sit in the top 12 with only 1 loss. I think they just got confirmation of, hey, we've probably got little wiggle room here. You know, we can probably lose one more game. We're not hoping for that, but we probably can lose one more game and still have a playoff spot. And I didn't know if you were necessarily going to see that in this original college football playoff ranking, but last night you did.
Realistically speaking, the other thing that we learned with this, if you're a group of 5 team, now one team gets in, we know that, but if you're a group of 5 team and you lose to a non-top 25 opponent, you're basically done. It's basically over. At any point, every game is an elimination game, especially when you're not playing top 25 opponents. Because you look at Boise, right? They're the top group of 5 team right now. They have 1 loss on the season, and it was at Oregon. So they lost to the best team in the country on the road. Yeah, okay, we're going to go ahead and forgive that for you. You're 12th. The last spot in possible, you're 12th in that ranking. SMU, ACC, which is effectively being treated right now as a group of 5 team. The only other team up towards the top of these rankings that is in the ACC is Miami, and that's because they are undefeated. They have not lost a game so far this year. SMU has 1 loss on the season. It was against BYU. BYU is ranked 9th in the country right now. So we're not going to dock them too much for that. SMU, you'll go ahead and slot in at 13, right ahead of all of those 2-loss SEC teams that T-Bone's mentioning. If you don't look impressive down the stretch, though, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting past. It could Ole Miss, for example, or LSU or Texas A&M pass SMU? Absolutely. You guys mentioned the LSU versus Alabama game going into this weekend. If LSU wins that one, I bet you they pass SMU in these rankings next week.
Oh, yeah.
Because it'll just be a bigger win.
Yeah, you have to.
And that's a 2-loss team that's passing up a 1-loss ACC team, not a group of 5, but an ACC team. These rankings are going to get frustrating as we move along here. And it's why I'm not sure that I agree with the idea that they should be doing them right now, but it's made for TV, and let's go. They're going to get more and more difficult to explain each week because the process will continue changing because the information changes. Right now, Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, they have a different resume than what they'll have next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks down the road. So I do think you're right, T-Bone. You're seeing them reward SEC, Big Ten. If you're not in one of those conferences, I would start making sure I have on my schedule somebody from those 2 respective conferences every single season.
And this year, I don't even think it's wrong. You know, I wonder what it'll look like potentially a year, 2 years from now when you do have, I mean, the SEC and Big Ten, let's just be honest, they are the super conferences. But there's going to be years where it's down. I mean, we've seen it. I thought last year the SEC was down. It wasn't very deep. It had like 2 elite teams in it. But outside of that, it was a down year for the conference. I wonder what will happen in that year. I think this year this is right. This is right. I am 100% in on, hey, SMU, sure, they have 1 loss, and there's a 2-loss team ahead of them. It's a better schedule. I mean, it's just flat out a better schedule for Alabama. Their 2 losses are to Vanderbilt, who's a pretty solid team that probably fits right in there in the middle. Vandy would be one of the best teams in the ACC. Yeah. No questions asked about it. They would be one of the best teams in the ACC.
I would say probably 2nd.
Yeah, I'd put them like right there with Clemson and SMU. And the only team I think would be ahead of them would be Miami.
And if you put them on a neutral field, I'm not entirely sure Miami's significantly better.
I would agree with that.
I think it'd be like a 4-point line in favor of Miami.
I
agree. Consider taking Vandy with the points in that scenario.
And like, put them in the Big 12, I think it's the same conversation. I think the only team better than them is probably BYU. But again, if you put them on a neutral field, they might be favored BYU by like 4 or 5. I could totally see Vandy winning that football game.
As of today, how many teams do you guys think are still in play, still alive for the college football playoff? Because I think it's 22. I think it's basically the top 21 teams all the way down to Washington State, where you get to the 1-loss Washington State team. Beyond that, it's Louisville, Clemson, Mizzou, Army. It's the top 21 plus Army. who's undefeated, and if they somehow end up running the table, I do think that they will end up potentially getting in. But I think that's it. I think it's those top 21 teams plus Army.
Yeah.
If Army runs the table, it means they got to win against Notre Dame. So that'll be
impressive.
Qualify them as being eligible to get in my opinion.
Yeah, I would put it at 22. The real question, how many is after next week? How many drop off after next week?
Well, there's going to be some elimination games that are played this weekend.
So you could go from 22 to what?
Ole Miss. If Ole Miss loses this weekend at home against Georgia, you're done.
Yeah.
You can't get in with 3 losses, and you've basically
just said LSU, Alabama, one of those two.
That's probably an elimination game there as well.
Does K-State play this weekend?
Yeah, but I don't think they've got a top 25 matchup.
Oh, they don't?
I don't think so.
I don't know that they play this
Yeah, no, they're off. They play Arizona State next.
Those are probably the 2 big ones.
Yeah.
So you'll be
not a whole lot then.
I mean, other teams could lose. Like if Iowa State loses on the road this weekend against Kansas, it's only a 3-point line, by the way. Crazy. If they lose that game, they're done. You can't get in with 2 losses, your schedule in the Big 12, and expect to get in. But if we're talking about just like 2 teams that are going head-to-head in a potential elimination,
So not a whole lot then.
Two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably 22 is probably the right answer. I would probably lean maybe one more 23 and include Clemson into this. But looking at Clemson's schedule, like really what they have to do is they've got to win out and get significant help. But even with 2 losses as an ACC team, I don't know if they get in. I think they're probably still alive. I think their name will help them a little bit. And they've got a top 25 matchup against Pitt. And then they've got South Carolina. Though South Carolina's not good, they're a part of that kind of muddy middle in the SEC that is pretty good still. So
I think South
they've
Carolina's
got
good.
somewhat of a chance, in my opinion.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. Last thing here. Guys, if Georgia ends up losing this weekend, would they be eliminated? I don't think so. I think you can get in this year with 2 losses in the SEC. I think Georgia would fall. I think they would go to like that range of Texas A&M, LSU, where they're at right now. They'd be 11 to 15, somewhere in that range if they lose this upcoming weekend, and that very much does not disqualify you. And they would still have the potential of beating Tennessee the following week and adding another quality win to their resume. So at that point, you would have a win against Clemson, Texas, and Tennessee, with one of those 3 coming on the road. That's still probably a resume that gets you in. This is just not a season in which you're going to see 8 teams undefeated and then 4 others that have 1 loss. I think you're going to get in with 2 losses in the SEC this year.
Yeah,
I don't think
agree.
they're disqualified.
I think 2 losses SEC you get in. I think 2 losses Big 10 you get in. I think when you get to ACC, Big 12, you're going to need significant help if you have 2 losses.
All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. But next, time for some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, who have been making people comfortable since 1926. And they are reminding you that if you've got an older HVAC system that you know sooner or later it's going to hit the fritz and we're going to have to go out and get a new one, now is the time to call Classic Air Care and upgrade your HVAC system, because there's government regulations that kick in on January 1st that are going to raise the prices of those HVAC systems because of the fluids that they're using. 15 to 20% price hike after the first of the year. And with Classic Air Care, they're able to come out, they're able to look at your old unit and find how that they can upgrade your HVAC system to better your home. And also helps you save a little bit money because there's financing options that Classic Air Care has for you. So give them a call today, have them come out, check out your old unit, get the knowledgeable technicians that come out from Classic Air Care. They'll walk you through everything. They'll tell you what you need, what you don't need. They're upfront, honest with you on everything that you need. Give them a call today. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you, or you can schedule online. That's classicaircare.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues took down the Tampa Bay Lightning by a final score of 3-2. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they host the Utah Hockey Club. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Let's start out with this, Alex. The NFL's trade deadline was yesterday. There wasn't a ton of movement on the actual day of. We did see prior to that, though, some significant moves, especially at the wide receiver position. The big one yesterday was Lattimore, cornerback coming from the New Orleans Saints, traded to the Washington Commanders. Alex, now that we have effectively finished all of the significant transactions for teams, who would you put as your top contenders in both the AFC and the NFC? As of today, who would you put as your top 3 contenders in either respective conference?
Okay, so AFC, Chiefs would be number 1. I would put Bills number 2 and Ravens number 3.
Bills over the Ravens.
Yeah. I just think the Bills have an all-around game. The Ravens still not sold on defensively, although I know that they're good. I think the Bills are better defensively, but I could hear the argument for either 2-3, but none of those trump the Chiefs. And the NFC is where it gets really fun. I think it's clear-cut Lions number 1. I would put the Commanders number 2 after that trade for Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything, but I think that makes them a better team. And then I would put the Vikings 3.
Wow.
I think the Vikings are above the Packers. I don't trust Sam Darnold, but what I do trust is that offense, and I think they got a very smart head coach. Until I know Jordan Love is at 100%, I have to take the Vikings over the Packers.
So I agree with your AFC one. I would flip Buffalo and Baltimore. I think Baltimore's 2, Buffalo 3, but I agree with the top 3, and I don't know if there's a clear fourth one. For me in the NFC, look, I think Detroit is probably 1 for me. I would probably go Packers 2, and then I would go Vikings 3. I don't view the Commanders as a top 3 contender right now. I still think they're a little bit away, and I think the Lattimore trade helps them. But I just am not 100% sold that they're going to be a playoff caliber team. Now, I don't know if I trust Sam Darnold in the playoffs, but to your point, I love the weapons that he's got offensively. It makes it pretty simple for him to get the ball out of his hand, get it to some of their weapons, and their defense is unbelievable. So I think my top 3 contenders are all in the North. It's Detroit, Green Bay, and then Minnesota.
I go Detroit, Green Bay, and Washington. That would be my order. So I'm just flipping what you had, basically.
You just don't
Alex.
have Minnesota?
Yep, don't have Minnesota. I have them 4th. For me, listen, man, it's hard for me to get over the Darnold thing. And I think we've seen some slippage in his play in recent weeks. He still makes a few amazing throws every single week.
I think that defense is so good that
Very
even if Darnold isn't great, you got Jefferson, you got Hawkinson, you got guys who can make plays.
I just think when you get into a big playoff game, like if I'm going into a postseason game and it's them against the 49ers, for example, right? I don't know if the 49ers will make it, but if they do, am I really going to trust him?
No.
Am I really going to trust him to go against that pass rush and not get skittish and not make the big throw that ends up costing his team? I don't. It's the same reason why if I'm going to the AFC side of things, like I get where T-Bone's coming from, because if we're projecting forward here, who do I trust more in the playoffs? It's unfair maybe, but I think it's based on resume so far. I trust Josh Allen more in the playoffs than I do with Lamar Jackson.
That's where my thought process was.
Lamar's proven to me time and time again, these are difficult games for him, man. He takes way too many sacks. Those negative plays end up really coming back to bite you in the playoffs. That's where they kill you. The interceptions, fumbles, and sacks. Lamar doesn't throw a ton of interceptions, but he fumbles a lot and he takes a ton of sacks. And that ends up taking you out of field goal range. Happened to them last year against Kansas City. It ends up where you fumble potentially and you give an easy drive for the opposing offense. For all of Josh Allen's flaws, and he's got some, he does give the ball away occasionally. He doesn't take sacks ever. And he basically never fumbles either. It's the interceptions that can come back to get him. He's doing that less this year, so I trust the Bills a little bit more. But yeah, I would have Detroit, Green Bay, and Washington as my top 3 teams in the NFC right.
And if you get Jordan Love back to Like, you're never going to be 100%, but as close to 100% as you could be. That's where the Packers could overstep the Vikings. But for now, if I don't have Jordan Love at 100%, I don't know if I could trust that team.
All right, next thing as we continue along here with NFL quick hitters. Guys, we have seen a coach get fired now. We've seen a couple of them, actually. One, a head coach with the New Orleans Saints. They had to do it. It was time. Another, the Raiders apparently are really upset by what they're getting from Gardner Minshew. They had to fire their offensive coordinator. Everything's going to be better now that the Turner family, Norv and his son, are in charge of the offense. It's going to be great.
God
what could
thunder.
possibly go wrong?
Everyone's upset with Thor.
So, the reason I bring that up, Alex, who is the contender that is going to suffer that fate at the end of the season?
Ooh.
The contending coach that this team will get to the end of the year and they'll say, you know what? It's time for us to make a change. We can't continue doing this. Because I think Philadelphia is that team.
Yeah, I was going to say it's got to be Philadelphia. I mean, you wonder if Cincinnati, but I mean, if Cincinnati turns it on the rest of the way, then obviously that's going to put them out of it. You're not going to fire the Texans head coach. They've already fired the Jets. So, yeah, it would probably be Philadelphia. Miami, too?
Oh, interesting. They're not a contender, but sure.
But, I mean, they came into the
2-6.
season as a contender.
Jeez. Yeah, sure.
And I know the Tua injury's tough, but, like, you have to be skeptical of Mike McDaniel at this point when you thought you were going to be at least competitive with all those weapons. But I think Philadelphia is, like, in a tier of its own, and then you can make arguments for the next group.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if there's another contender across the NFL that I look at and go, they would want to make a change. You know, because I can't see, like, if Baltimore fails again in the playoffs, I don't see them moving on from Harbaugh. I think it'd be stupid if they did anyways.
Chance.
I think it'd be stupid if Buffalo moved on from Sean McDermott. There's not any other real contender that I look at, like, unless you view Chicago as a contender, but they're on the outside looking in now. Eberflus, I think, is gone at the end of the year. But, again, I don't view them as a contender.
DJ Moore said about him earlier this week.
Oh, no, I can't imagine.
Asked, did he lose the locker room? He said, well, I can't say no.
Way to go, DJ.
Dude.
Yeah, I like that.
This is why we do media training 101. That was a bad answer.
No, I love it.
The Bears do a lot of talking. A lot of talking. And if you're winning, you can get away with that. The Chiefs do a lot of talking. The Bengals do a lot of talking. They've done a lot of winning in the past. Bears haven't been doing a whole lot of winning over the last few seasons. And yet they still keep talking. And
It's going to work out for them at some point, right?
yeah, I'm sure it will. Their best win on the season is against the Rams?
They were beat up at that point. I don't even know if that's really
Well,
their
here
best
are their
win.
other choices, T-Bone.
Okay.
Tennessee, Carolina Panthers, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are your four choices. You tell me which one you think is the best win for the Bears so
It
far
was
this
still
season.
the beat up Rams.
They're going to have to make a change at the head coach position as well. It really comes down to, do you consider them to be a contender at this point or not? Based on that resume, I would say right now the answer to that is a resounding no. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up on the other side, we'll get to questions and answers and give you the latest update on Dylan Holloway. It's certainly a positive one. We'll do that next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK with Alex Ferrario. And Alex, yesterday was a huge day in the state of Missouri. The Prop 2, Amendment 2 ended up passing, which means very soon we will not have to go over to the state of Illinois to bet anymore. But while we do, we're betting over on Circa. We're going to win the most money possible over there, and that's why I bet with Circa Sports in Illinois. Alex, I have bad news for my fellow Mizzou fans.
What, man?
I'm betting on Oklahoma this weekend. I don't think Brady Cook's playing in this game. It's a 3-point line in favor of Oklahoma, and I'm unfortunately willing to lay those 3 points. So I'm going to go ahead and take Oklahoma minus the 3 points on the road at Missouri this weekend, and I'm taking the under. Nobody scoring in this game. So give me the under on points. Give me Oklahoma minus the 3 points. I'm betting all of that over on Circa.
And you put it together for one of those parlays. Hell, throw 10 more bets on that one to bring in the most money possible. Why? Because Circa's not limiting you based off of their winnings. Every player has the same limits, unlike other sports books that are going to limit you. And they're so confident in their stuff that they tell you to go check out other sports books. They know you'll come back to Circa Sports Illinois. So download it today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
All right, I got an update on Dylan Holloway, who's just the most badass human being in the world, apparently.
Big D!
Quote, Dylan Holloway is doing well. Said he feels normal. Said the puck hit him in the vagus nerve.
Yeah, the vagus
he felt
nerve.
lightheaded on the bench. Didn't remember much until he was loaded onto the stretcher. Holloway says he hopes to play tomorrow. Alex, you have another update. This comes from David Solomon.
Yeah, David Solomon. Yeah, this is the part that enter badass mode. Holloway said he was hit on that nerve and, quote, knew he felt a little off when he was hit, but didn't want to leave the ice because there was a 2-on-1. Now, he didn't leave the ice and like the 2-on-1 happened. He broke up the 2-on-1, then forechecked to retrieve the puck in the offensive zone to set his team up, and then left the ice and basically said he felt lightheaded and didn't know what happened the rest of the way. The man broke up a 2-on-1 and then passed out on the bench. Welcome to the core club, Big D.
What a beast.
That is impressive.
That guy's so cool.
The vagus nerve is a part of your nervous system, controls specific body functions such as digestion, heart rate, and your immune system. These functions are involuntary, meaning you can't consciously control them.
So Dylan Holloway,
and this got hit. It got hit with a puck,
and
which
then
basically shut all of that stuff down. So his heart rate was stopping. His immune system wasn't working.
and then looked at
But
the
he broke
puck,
up a 2-on-1.
and then he looked at the puck afterwards and said, "Do I look nervous?"
Earlier today, we said, Alex, in our open, prior to knowing this is exactly what happened, you can't question this team's toughness. You can question a lot about them, but you can't question their toughness anymore. That's unbelievable, dude.
And the guy's going to play tomorrow.
It's the vagus nerve, apparently.
Is it the vagus nerve? Well,
maybe, I don't know.
Spell it like Las Vegas, then. And he's going to play tomorrow.
He's playing tomorrow?
Well, he said that's the plan. He was told no physical activity for 24 hours, and then he's like, cool, 48 hours, though, I'm in, right?
He's probably like, cool, I don't want to go to practice.
Yeah,
Nobody
I
likes
feel
to
a
practice.
sword in it. I've got a bruise on my neck.
My vagus nerve hurts, but I'll be good for tomorrow, Coach. Don't worry about it.
Oh, my God.
I mean, these are the types of moments, and again, I'm not expecting anything special at the end of this season, but these are the types of moments that you look at as a group, and you're like, we got something special.
I'm betting on the Blues tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm
you
betting on
kidding?
a Holloway goal.
I was going to say, I'd bet on a Holloway goal if I was anybody.
That's
awesome.
pretty unbelievable.
That's awesome. Good for him, man.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, what does it mean that Missouri passed to legalize sports betting yesterday? Honest answer, honest to God answer, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it's going to take to get this thing up and running in the state. There's been some projections that it's going to take like a year before that happens. Other states have done it in as little as a few months, like 4 months. If that ends up being the case, hey, March Madness, baby, let's go.
Hell yes.
Let's go. I don't know what that means for our annual Alton trip, because part of it is we can go over there, just bet on sports.
High five, T-Von.
No, man, I want to go back.
No, man.
Maybe we do something out here. I don't know. But
if you want to bring BK and Ferrario show to your place of business while we party, there we go.
I'll tell you this. It's very good for us, because in this industry, just full disclosure, advertising is how we stay on the air. You guys don't pay to listen to this. This is free over-the-air consumption. Advertising is the name of the game, and it's a tough time for advertising right now. Sports betting comes with a lot of ad dollars. That's a huge deal for our own industry. So just on a personal level, I was rooting for this in a huge way last night. Just professionally, it helps me. Personally, I like doing it.
Yeah.
But we don't really have a ton of information otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, the personal side of it, like, look, you probably enjoy sports betting, and you probably don't enjoy having to drive to Illinois to go park in a shady parking lot like BK does to place your bets.
Right. I go right over on 270, cross over the river. There's a Hardee's on the right side. That's where I
BK
go.
parks somewhere, and he's just like, uh-oh. But you got to get your bets in.
In South County, I know my brother-in-law, he goes over there. They're like right across the river. There's a little parking lot. He said there's like dozens of cars every Sunday when he goes over there. You could sit over there like 8, 9 a.m.
They're all like buddies now.
Everybody rolls their window
Everybody's
down
in their car. They should have like a, Sonic the Drive-In, where it used to be like you order, I don't know if they still have this, you order with the
I've never been to a
button
Sonic.
that you press with your car kind of sitting there.
It should be a parking lot tailgate right now.
They should do that, where you can go sit over there, have some food delivered. Maybe they have like what's a Frankie's Garden out in Cottleville. You should have something like that on the other side of the river. I guess you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, but the professional side, like you had just mentioned, that's the bigger thing, because it brings in more advertising dollars, and it opens up a lot more possibilities for a lot of people in this business. And when you're bringing in advertising dollars, this might surprise a lot of people, but you have a better chance of staying employed in those situations. So the more the merrier in that circumstance.
Somebody on the text line said, what's your go-to betting site? I use Establish the Run. That's my go-to for prop bets, those kinds of things. Otherwise, man, sides are just so hard to win.
Use the old noggin.
Pay for somebody else to help me win at a 50% rate, lose on the VIG. So I continue to lose on my own.
They're actually asking BK where his betting site is, so they don't use that one.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, what do you think will be the first move that the Cardinals make this offseason?
Trade away Ryan Helsley. I think that'll be the first one that they accomplish.
I'm trying to think who is the easy. I think the Helsley one's going to take time. I think it might be Matz gets dealt first, just because to me, $11 million. I just saw Scott Boras. He's speaking at the GM meetings. Said Yusei Kikuchi, because of course, is the pitcher that seems to be most sought after here early on. Why? Because he doesn't have, stuff. He doesn't have the qualifying offer attached to him, and he's like in the mid-tier market. So I think Matz might be the first guy that they might be able to move on for. Whoever maybe misses out on Kikuchi, one or two other arms come off the market. Like I just saw Kyle Hendricks signed with the LA Angels.
1 year deal, baby.
I can't even believe he got a contract to the major leagues, but
the Brewers should have signed him exclusively for games against the Cardinals.
Absolutely. But I think Matz might be the first one they move.
Makes a lot of sense. I think it'll be a pitcher. I'll go Steven Matz as well. That feels like the most likely starter that they're going to get potential offers on. I could see Helsley being somebody that ends up getting traded a little bit later in the offseason. And then I think they're going to move a position player. I just don't know who it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be Ivan Herrera. I wouldn't do that. I don't know if it's going to be Wilson Contreras, Nolan Arenado. All of those feel a little more complicated. And they could potentially have to be a backup plan for a team. It sounds like Houston is probably going to bring back Alex Bregman. I don't think they're going to be involved in the Arenado deal, but they want to get the Bregman deal done first, and then they can pivot if they don't get that done to a guy like Nolan Arenado. So I think that's all on the back burner for some of these teams. Give up fewer assets, kind of like the Cardinals. Remember when they got Wilson Contreras? It was Contreras or Murphy, and they ended up going the Contreras side of things because they didn't have to trade talent to get him. I think that's what you're going to see. Teams that miss out on their other targets will pivot towards some of these Cardinals. And I think that this offseason is going to be pretty slow moving because of the lack of understanding of what these budgets are going to be until they find out stuff on the RSNs. Might be a while before we see movement in the market. So I think it'll probably be somebody like Steven Matz where it's just easier. It's a cleaner break for all parties involved. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to play a game of More Likely to Happen. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. But next, Alex has been singing the praises for Jordan Binnington for years. He is now becoming the best version of himself both on and off the ice. And Alex, I think it's time to ask a question after last night when he became the second winningest goalie in the history of this franchise. Where's this guy going to rank all time among the Blues whenever he's done with his career here in St. Louis? Talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
And Jordan Binnington with that win moves into sole possession of second place on the Blues all-time win list for a goaltender with 149. 2 behind his agent Mike Liut for first overall on the Blues franchise list.
That's what it sounded like last night right here in your home of the Blues 101 ESPN as Jordan Binnington becomes the second winningest goalie in the history of this storied franchise. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, he's becoming the best version of himself right now. You look at the way that he played that game. He's just solid, just really solid. And that's been the case really for the last couple of seasons. We've had a million different conversations, the two of us, three of us really, about Jordan Binnington and the antics, right? That used to be the story about him. Well, he's great, but look at all of this other stuff you have to deal with. And it's on the ice stuff. It's not like he's going out in his personal life and having any issues. On the ice, he just starts scrums, just a bunch of stuff after the whistle. It's just always something with him. We've seen basically none of that since the beginning of last season. It's been completely cut out of his game. And it's something that he has talked about publicly, where he's been focusing on, whether it's breathing exercises or just honing in all of those emotions and using that to channel it towards his performance instead of channeling it to get into these dumb fights on the ice. He used to think that that would be something that like really gets his team going. I think it became almost a negative effect at times because it was actually hurting the team sometimes. He got away from it. And now what you're seeing is just the best version of him on the ice on a consistent basis. And Alex, yesterday I thought there was a really important moment, and I'm glad Jeremy Rutherford wrote about this over in The Athletic this morning, where there was that goal that was let up, and it was started because of the Perunovic and Kessel pairing, right? And after that goal scored, Binnington goes over to the bench immediately and talks to Perunovic and Kessel and says, hey, I want you to stay aggressive. And those guys talked after the game, and Kessel said it was really important for him to be able to hear that because he sometimes feels like, I screwed up there. And so to be able to hear that from your goalie, who you're leaving out to dry, for him to say that to Kessel, it gave him that confidence that he needed. And then boom, next time those guys are on the ice, because of their aggressiveness, it leads to another goal. That's the kind of impact that you can have if you're Jordan Binnington when you are channeling that emotion in a positive direction and using it to lead your teammates. That's huge, man. Jordan Binnington is becoming the best version of himself both on and off the ice right now.
He's a leader. He leads with his play, which speaks for itself when you look at what he's done over these past couple of seasons. And then that play that you just referenced, and then off of the ice. You know, it's funny that you say you haven't seen antics this season because that Ottawa Senators game, I don't know if people remember this, but it was at the end when the Blues were already getting shellacked. I think it was like 7-0. And Brady Tkachuk was pushing around some of the Blues players, and Binnington came out of his crease and grabbed Brady Tkachuk and pulled him away. But nobody talked about it because
he didn't throw his stick at him or throw his helmet at him.
I understand, but that happens 2 years ago.
He de-escalated a situation, not continued to escalate it.
But 2 years ago, that would have been clipped and it would have been shared up. Binnington up to his usual self, getting into the middle of scrums.
Yeah, because at that point in time, he would have taken his stick and taken it to the legs of Brady Tkachuk.
No, look, he tried to fake Jason Zucker.
I don't think I'm wrong on this.
Look, this is just an area that you and I are always
swung a stick at him.
This is just an area you and I will always disagree on. I personally feel like Jordan.
Binnington clearly agrees with me. Because Binnington has eliminated that stuff from his
That's
game.
fine. But some of this also could be Doug Armstrong explaining to him, like, hey, man, you need to knock this stuff off. Mike Lee.
There's a reason for that.
Where you and I will always disagree is Jordan Binnington is always meticulous in his decisions. And I think part of the reason.
I think the emotions eventually caught up with him.
Can I finish?
Go for it, man.
He does those. He does those because he feels like his team needs a little bit of a push. And it could be called dirty tactics, whatever you want. I personally feel like Binnington finds ways to do that for his team. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. In the past, it hasn't. Some of this has been the mental toughness of the team around him. But you're right. He has found ways. Mike Liut even told us this, his agent, former goaltender. Yeah, there's different ways that you can impact your roster, and that was one of them.
He also has eliminated that stuff out of his game, and I think it's made him a better version of himself. And I think it's made the team better. I think you're not having to deal with any of the crap that existed previously within his own game. But at times, it cost them penalties. Like at times, was a detriment to the way that he wanted to perform. So you're seeing the best version of himself. Somebody from the 314 said BK can't admit that he's wrong. I don't believe that I'm wrong on this. And that's fine. Alex can say his piece. He can disagree with me, and that's totally cool. The Blues have made it clear from Doug Armstrong all the way down. Craig Berube said, we can't have that stuff anymore. Just go out there and play hockey. Doug Armstrong has said that. His agent, Mike Liut, has said that. Jordan Binnington has talked publicly about all of the different things that he's doing to eliminate that stuff from his game because it was becoming distracting to the actual performance that he was putting on the ice. That's what I'm trying to get at, is I think that when he eliminated all of that other stuff, we have seen a more consistent version of Jordan Binnington in the regular season. Previously, Jordan Binnington was an elite playoff goalie and a guy that you weren't sure what you were getting night to night during the regular season. Now I don't feel that way any longer. Some of that is because he's not having to play as much. That's important. I think they have a better backup goalie for him than what they previously had. And you've always said he is at his best when he's getting pushed by his number 2 goalie.
And you can't play him 60-plus games.
I'm just kidding. I think
Kanye West moment.
I think that you're seeing a better version of him because of that, and a better version of him because he's done some of this stuff to be able to hone in what his what he previously was having problems with. I wanted to get to this though, Alex. Where's Jordan Binnington? Because you have a better history memory bank because you grew up with this team. This was the number 1 team for you growing up. Mm-hmm. Where's he going to go down among maybe it's the favorite, the best, however you want to categorize this, the best players for Blues fans and let's say the last 25 years, because that's really the Blues that you know. Is he going to be on like the Mount Rushmore of Blues when all is said and done?
I think you'll have to expand the Mount Rushmore a little bit because like for 4 people, and if you said the last 25 years, absolutely. But like franchise history, you can't overseat Bernie Federko. I think Brian Sutter's always going to be there. At Brett Hall, and then you got McKinnis and Pronger. It's so hard because you've had a lot of Hall of Famers on this team. In terms of just goaltenders, he will go down as the best goaltender in Blues history. There's no question. You'll surpass Curtis Joseph. You'll surpass Grant Fuhr, Mike Liut. You will be the best one because of that Stanley Cup, and you're at the leaderboard of a lot of Blues statistics. In terms of overall player, I mean, Hall, Federko, Al McInnes, those are going to be 3 guys that no question are up there. And then you get into the Pronger and the Sutters, and where does that come into it? I personally feel like you're going to have to put Binnington up on that Mount Rushmore. Why? Because he won you a Stanley Cup. And, like, yes, he's had the downs, and you'll look at his career numbers and be like, he wasn't really good in the middle of the season. He always gave you a shot to win. And depending on what the rest of his career looks like, if it finishes in St. Louis, you're going to wrap up with the most wins, probably towards the top in terms of shutouts, goals against, save percentage, blah, blah, blah. But you're always going to have that Stanley Cup. And that's a lot more than a lot of those other guys on Mount Rushmore. And at least off that Stanley Cup team, he's probably going to go down as the most memorable player from that.
And it's because he stayed.
Yeah, because Petro's up there if he stays in St. Louis. Like, Petro's got a statue outside of Enterprise Center if he stays in St. Louis.
I'm going to be really curious to see what the next 3 years looks like for Binnington, because I think that's going to ultimately determine, it's hard to say right now how we feel about this, but if we get 3-4 years from now and he goes on another run in the postseason, he's going to be up there with any of the players that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy that gave you that chance. He stayed through it. The Blues decided to keep him around. And then
that's the thing.
If you have a cup and then you go on another run, it's really hard to be like, somebody else is going to be above him. He's the only guy that's done it in that for this franchise in the history of the franchise. So I wasn't here for the whole year, so I can't speak to that. I mean, from everything that I understand, it's going to be hard to live up to anything that goes beyond that, right? He also had the personality and everything that comes along with it, but it's right up there. From what I have seen in the last 15 years, that's what I can speak to for me. I would have to imagine he's number 1.
What's going to be crazy about it, too, is your contract's always got 3 more years after this. You're 34 at the end of the contract. Do you finish in St. Louis, or do they opt to go in the different direction and let Jordan Binnington walk? Because I do think, even though that's out of Binnington's control, I do think some of that's going to play into it, because if you go finish your career, then it's going to be, remember Jordan Binnington and that Stanley Cup. But if you finish your career as a Blue and take a lesser role, kind of like what Jake Allen did before he wrapped up his career, that's when you look at it and you're like, man, he's, like you had mentioned, which is a great point, he stayed through all of it. He stayed through the bad, he was there for the good, and then he got back to when they were good and contributed in a lesser role.
Coming up in 15 minutes, Derrick Goold had some really interesting quotes from other teams in the Midwest that are going through something similar to what the St. Louis Cardinals are with the Guardians and the Minnesota Twins. How are they approaching it? How does it differ, or how is it similar to what the Cardinals are trying to accomplish? We'll talk about that coming up in 15 minutes, and an update on our guy Skip Schumacher, who I think he's lined up his next job. We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. More likely to happen is next year on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely. Let's start out with this. Guys, more likely to happen. The St. Louis Blues make the playoffs or the Missouri Tigers win their next two football games.
I'm saying the Blues make the playoffs. If Brady Cook's not playing, I think you can just write that team off. I'm sorry, Drew Pine, but I
agree.
I haven't seen much that gets me excited about, they can find a way to pull out some victories.
Mizzou's a +3 this weekend against Oklahoma, excuse me. What, +150 on the money line, something like that?
And it's even gone down on the ESPN bet I just saw. It's down to 2.5.
Are you serious?
Yikes.
Oh, my God.
Boy, Eli doing a good job selling this idea of Cook's going to play.
Yeah, he is.
And then next week, you're at South Carolina. I think South Carolina's actually good. They have an excellent pass rush. And if you don't have Brady Cook for that one, I don't have any idea how you win it. That just seems like such an unbelievably tall task. Their losses this year for South Carolina, LSU, in a game they should have won, but their quarterback got hurt at halftime. And then Ole Miss, Alabama. They lost 2 of those 3 games by 1 score. I think it's much more likely the Blues make the postseason.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't even think the Blues are that good of a team in terms of where they'll finish in the standings. But I would be shocked if Missouri ends up winning those 2 games. I think if Cook misses the final 4 games, they go 1-3. And I wouldn't be shocked if they went 0-4. Mississippi State's the only one I'm giving them a shot in.
I'm going to go around that light as well in terms of the Blues playoffs. More likely to happen. The Blues make the playoffs or the Nashville Predators blow their team up.
I think it's more likely Nashville ends up blowing their team up. I said in the open, you can't question a lot of... You can question the team's overall ability, their talent. You can't question their toughness. I am still questioning whether or not the Blues have what it takes to make it to the postseason this year. Dude, this is getting really ugly for Nashville.
I don't know if people saw it, but so Barry Trotz on the afternoon show on Nashville's flagship station basically said, if we don't get this thing going, we're blowing it up. We're going into my rebuild plan. I don't know what a rebuild plan is after you sign Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, and Jonathan Marchessault, but it can't be pretty.
It doesn't exist. How are you getting rid of those contracts? People know. You're in the middle of the season, man. You can't just move on from Marchessault and Stamkos, that money. That's not an easy thing to accomplish. So I think it's more likely that those guys, or that the Predators end up going through a rebuild. Have you seen Stamkos' numbers this year, by the way?
Yeah.
He's a -10 on the ice so far. He's averaging 19 minutes a night. 2 goals, 5 points in 12 games. This is problematic. This is always the concern when you sign a guy that's over the age of 30 who was playing with superstars in his previous team, and they said, we're ready to move on. Not good.
I think Barry Trotz, he said it in that interview to where he's like, look, we've got 3 guys who scored 40 goals last season that refused to shoot the puck. He said everybody wants to pass right now. Some of it feels like what the Blues had early on in 2018 to where it was like, hey, we got a lot of guys that want to play, but they're not in the same line. So, I could see them turning it around. The part that I don't understand is he says we're going into a rebuild plan, but he's like, we're going to play our younger players. So you're going to play a dude who's making $800,000 who has 0 NHL games and what? Sit Jonathan Marchessault in the press box or Steven Stamkos? That's going to be an ugly rebuild plan. So I'm going to say Blues. I'm going to say Blues make the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say Blues make the playoffs as well. I don't know I would love to know what the rebuild plan looks like in the Barry Trotz's world. I would love to see what that looks like because I can't imagine the scenario in which you're able to do that. I just can't. I don't know what you do when you've got those guys on those contracts and they've got no moves, they've got no trades. You feel stuck, and I don't know where you go if you're the Nashville Predators. It'll be interesting to see, but I have no idea what you do.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
Guys, more likely to not be in the Cardinals lineup come opening day. Nolan Arenado or Wilson Contreras?
I'm going to say Nolan Arenado. I still don't know where he goes, but I just think they're going to try to figure something out with him and move him, say, Wilson, come on back, figure out the catching situation. Maybe they trade Ivan Herrera, even though I think that would be silly. Say Nolan Arenado's the more likely one to be traded.
Yeah, that's the one I'm going to go with as well, because I think Wilson Contreras, if he wants to be here, they're going to say, sure, we'll use this bat and we'll figure out what to do elsewhere. I would say Nolan Arenado.
I'm with you guys. Now, the Bregman thing makes things a little bit more interesting, but I don't know. I just with you guys. I think it's going to be Arenado.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us a couple of scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. More likely to happen. The Eagles or the Steelers end up getting a top 2 seed in their respective conference. Which one's more likely to be a top 2 seed in the postseason? Eagles or the Steelers? Eagles right now are 6-2. The Steelers are also 6-2. Steelers are technically 3rd in the AFC. The Eagles are 6th, but they're, a game back of the Lions.
It's wild because both have something that I don't trust. One's got a coach I don't trust. The other's got a quarterback I don't trust. But I think I'm going to go with the Eagles because even if you don't trust the coach, they've got a great offense. Like, they've got an offense, and if Saquon's going to play like this, you'll be towards the top. And I think the NFC is at least a little bit more open than in terms of where the AFC's at. So I'll say the Eagles.
I'll say Eagles as well. I think their roster can make up for their deficiency with their head coach. I don't believe in the Steelers at all. Like, I think their quarterback situation stinks, and any team that can't really move the football, which I think is going to come back down to earth, even though some people are getting excited about the let Russ cook movement again. If you can't move the football, you're not going to do anything. I don't care how good your defense is. So I don't think they're going to end up being a top 2 seed. I don't think they're going to win their division. I can't even believe they're ahead of Baltimore right now.
Here are some of their remaining games, talking about the Steelers. 2 left against Baltimore. That'll be an easy way for Baltimore to pass them.
God, I don't want to see Russell Wilson in that game.
At Washington, at Cincinnati, at Philly, home against Kansas City. Their remaining schedule is brutal, man. It's basically divisional games, Philly, Kansas City, Washington. Good luck with that.
And Washington's your best bet.
Have you guys seen what the AFC playoff picture looks like? Like, if the playoffs started today, have you seen what the matchups are?
Aren't the Colts in?
No, but they would be better. This would be your first-round matchups. Talk about a terrible wild card weekend from the AFC. Denver at Buffalo.
Oh, no.
Chargers.
Buffalo by 7?
Yeah, probably.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Would you quit it over there?
Let him finish.
Let me finish. Chargers at the Steelers, and then Ravens at Texans. Now, that one would be okay.
Chargers and Steelers might be at least somewhat enjoyable.
Oh, no. Are you kidding me? Harbaugh's out there running the Iowa offense.
I was going to say, it's a 9-6
and the Steelers don't have an offense.
Like, Steelers would be a rematch of last year, right? Wasn't that the divisional round? When C.J. Stroud got pantsed by the Ravens defense? Wasn't that Yes, 34-10.
Yeah, that would be a pantsing.
The Ravens
that would be a pantsing.
Destroyed them. I would be interested in that game. Chargers-Steelers, I think, would be the most 1960s football game that you've ever seen. I think we've underestimated at this point the value of a good defense and a running game. I know that sounds absurd coming from me, but look at these teams that are in the playoffs. The Chargers, the Steelers, the Broncos, the Ravens. And now the Ravens obviously have an MVP caliber quarterback as well. But go over to the NFC side of things.
Oh, it's so much better.
But also defense and running games. They still matter. The more things change, the more they remain the same. The Lions are the best team in the NFL because they have a really good running game.
I think the worst part about Chargers and Steelers is how you sell Russell Wilson versus Justin Herbert.
Oh, the networks will not be fighting for that game.
Justin Herbert, who
we don't want it.
Supposed to be great, it hasn't been that good. And then it's like Russell Wilson. Woo.
Does Peacock still have a wild card game?
Oh, they don't want it.
Because that's it.
No, they don't want
Wherever
that.
Al Michaels is at, give him that one.
I can't. All those executives, man, they're going to go, man, I hope we don't have the last pick. I know what game's going to be available.
Can we flex, please?
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line if you guys want to get involved in the show. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, will join us coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. I would also love to give a little bit of kudos to Jordan Kyrou, who once again had a fantastic game last night. I think he's just been good all season long. Alex, is another thing that maybe we yell at each other about.
I'll let you finish on that one, though.
Coming up in about 30 minutes or so. But next, Derrick Goold had some really interesting quotes from mid-level teams across Major League Baseball, most of them from mid-markets in the Midwest. What does it say about what the Cardinals are trying to accomplish? We'll let you hear those next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here. The Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last night. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they host the Utah Hockey Club. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. The Joey will join Chris Kerber for puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So Derrick Goold had a really good piece over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch today. He's down at the general manager meetings right now, which are taking place in San Antonio. This is kind of the unofficial kickoff to the offseason for most people in the industry. And Alex, he's been able to catch up with a few of the other presidents of baseball operations in the Midwest markets. So he talked to the GM in Cleveland, talked to the guy in Minnesota as well. And he was trying to get a sense of, okay, the Cardinals are going in this direction. Cleveland's been doing this for years. Minnesota is in like smaller market, but also in terms of the revenue, much smaller than what the Cardinals are right now. So they've had to try to adjust in this way also. What are they doing? How's this work? What does it look like, et cetera? So he asked them about all of these different things with player development. He wrote this: to illustrate how competitive the development race has become, Antonetti recounted, the president of baseball operations for Cleveland, recounted the soaring growth of staffs and the cost to fill them. He estimated that when he started with Cleveland, the team had 8 members of the front office and roughly 130 people in player development. That includes the minor leagues and scouting. So 8 people in the front office, 130 in player development. Those numbers are now 50 people in the front office and 240 elsewhere in baseball operations. So the front office has 6 times more individuals, and the player development side has basically doubled for the Cleveland Guardians. So that's one aspect of this. Here's a quote from the Minnesota president of baseball operations to further discuss this, Alex. Quote, one thing that goes underreported to some degree across our industry is the cost of spending for player development. Said, I know that we focus a lot on payroll, but when I got to Minnesota, I put on paper for our ownership the investment in infrastructure spending for player development, scouting, some of our R&D, major league operations, etc. All of that is a real investment for Major League Baseball teams. It doesn't come out publicly in the sense of it's not on your payroll, but it's very real, and it's a recurring investment that you need to continue to add to over time. We've definitely doubled our investment even over that period of time. He added that over the past few years, quote, we're not alone in that. A lot of teams have done that. We are just trying to keep up, end quote. Well, the Cardinals have not. They're not one of the teams that has been able to keep up. They certainly have not doubled, I would imagine, what they have spent on player development. Alex, these are easy things to say as a president of baseball operations because it makes you look good and there's no way to really check the facts. What do you make of it, though, when you're hearing these things, not just from St. Louis, but also you're hearing Cleveland's president of baseball operations talk to Derrick Goold about it. You're hearing Minnesota's guy talk about this as well. What comes to mind for you?
I mean, on the Cardinal side of it, I know you just said bigger picture, but Cardinals, you are so behind. Like, you've been going down this old school path that just has not kept up with what Major League Baseball's. But the numbers are what really pops out to me. Where you go from 8 front office members to 50, you go from 130 people in player development to 240. And maybe this is just not as knowledgeable on my end, but it just seems a little bit of overkill. Like, it seems like you were throwing a ton of bodies into something where you're trying to make sure you're on top of every little thing. And obviously it's working when it comes to teams like Cleveland and teams like Minnesota and how they've developed players and how they've just continued to churn out players. But it just seems like a ton of guys, and you're pouring in a ton of resources into something like this that you hope pans out, but it really comes back to identifying the right players and putting the right players into the right positions. And maybe that is the staffing side of it. It just feels like something that, sure, you can say that we have 50 members in our front office and 240 people in our baseball operations, and that's how we're churning out these players. But is that really how? By just throwing numbers at it? Or is there more to this?
Yeah, my initial reaction when reading this was the first one, same as you, where I read this, is like, holy crap, the Cardinals are way behind. And not just in the technology that they have, but just the amount of bodies that they're going to be throwing into this and what they're going to be doing. Remember, they were talking about roving instructors, and they had, like, what was it, 2 or something like that down in the minor leagues? Well, my guess is they didn't have, like, 300 people in their front office then in player development working on things. But the second one for me is, look, times are definitely, or have definitely changed for baseball and player development. And it's funny that they pinpoint in this article the year that we've always been saying, 2014, 2015. Yep. It is funny that that's the exact time when you really start to see this really skyrocket. I look at this, and I do have some of the same question that Alex had is, does it really take that many people to do this? And you know what? We're not in the industry, so maybe it does. Call me skeptical. I think what you're seeing, though, is though you do need more people involved in this, I think it's just now become the newfangled thing for what teams used to say of, hey, you know what it takes to win a World Series? Oh, we got to rebuild. We got to tear it down to the studs. Hey, guess what, by the way, ties into 2014, 2015? The Cubs rebuilding, player development. What did some of these organizations look at? Rather than, hey, our fan base won't take on a rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it, we'll just reinvest into this because you can't look at it. We have no idea sure, they gave you a bunch of numbers of how many people are in there. We don't know what their actual investment is into the minor leagues and what they're trying to do.
You don't know what those people's job titles are, or how much they're making, or how that compares to what they otherwise.
Barista in Double-A.
And look, again, I do think the Cardinals are behind, and they do need to catch up. I don't know if they've got to go to this absurd number of what these people are in these organizations until... And maybe they do. Maybe that's what it is. I think where they're further behind is more of like the stuff that they categorize and what they have in this article. Hey, we've got the TrackMan stuff that's using this. We're using pitch modeling. We're using systems that help with bat swing and work on that stuff. He also talked about, I don't remember what one of them was, but it sounded like something they got from the military. All those kind of things, that's where the Cardinals are behind. The kind of data points that you need. And you do need people that need to be hired into the organization that understand what they're looking at, then can also look at that and then help translate that to the players. I just feel like this is, all of a sudden there's this shift in baseball where everybody's talking about this. Well, it's all about doing this under the hood, under the hood, under the hood, under the hood. Yes, I do think that is the case. And player development is a huge pipeline for every sport. Like, let's be honest, it's not just a baseball thing. You need that at every sport. To me, it's starting to feel more of like what happened in that rebuild era, where it was, why are we not spending on our big league club? Why do we need to be doing this as an organization? No, we're going to rebuild. That's the path to a championship. This feels like that. Why spend money on our big league team? Because we got to go to the minor leagues. That's where it starts for us.
I think the biggest thing is that the Cardinals, I remember Mo said this, I think at his press conference, one of the 4 that he had after the end of the season.
Fourth one.
And somebody asked him, why you guys have bought some of this technology previously. Why hadn't it been used? He said, well, people just didn't use it. Like, we bought it, we didn't use it, so we stopped buying stuff. And there's a really good quote from Mike Elias, who's now in charge of the Baltimore Orioles, who's implemented a lot of this stuff with Baltimore as well. And he said the main thing is you have to make sure that the information is actually being used and used well, and that costs money in terms of both people and expertise. That has raised the cost of player development overall throughout the sport, but ultimately, you think there is some return on investment. You have more young players that you're able to enjoy before they reach free agency. Seems to me like it pays off. The idea, and Goold mentioned this in his piece, is you're paying like $1 for every $10 that the Yankees are paying to go out and acquire that same guy via free agency. It's just a more thorough way of saying what we said the other day. Hey, instead of going out and signing Yusei Kikuchi, 3 years, $21 million per year, develop Yusei Kikuchi. Like, he may not have the same strikeout numbers. It might not be quite as like certain that you're going to get those numbers year to year. But why can't you get 150 innings and a 4.0 ERA out of somebody that's from your system? You can. You can do that. And you can develop them internally, but it does require some of this stuff. Like, it requires you to have this motion capturing image thing that they have.
Motion capturing thing.
Yeah.
It's about radar.
It's
a motion capture machine. The Twins have them at 2 levels within their system. And they said, quote, we have to be very specific in targeting our investments, end quote. Which is basically saying, yeah, man, we don't have money for more than that. We got 2. We got 2, and that's it. My guess is they probably have them like at their spring training complex and then AAA, something like that. The Cardinals are hoping to start investing in that stuff. That is like the TrackMan stuff, but to the nth degree, where you can see everything that has to do with pitch modeling. The Rays have like 100 of them. It's a made-up number, but they've got this stuff littered throughout their system, and it's how they've become the team that they are, at least what they believe has helped them develop all of these pitchers over the years. So I do think some of this is real. I think some of it is also an easy sell, to T-Bone's point. So it becomes a question of like how much of it is real, how much of this is necessary, and how much of this is just a, hey, don't look at the major league team where we're cutting $50 million in payroll. Look at this stuff that we're really investing in. That's something worth getting excited about. And our player development system that everybody's mad at right now because we haven't developed a star, well, it's going to be better. And people then ask, okay, but when? And you say, well, we don't know. It's crapshoot. It's minor leagues. It's player development. You just never know how or when it's going to work. It took the Orioles 5 years. It took the Astros 5 years. It took the Cubs 5 years. Could be 7 years before we really see the fruits of our labor, but it's going to pay off. You just got to be patient with us. It's a really great way to keep your job as a GM.
And I'm glad you brought up like the machines that they were using and kind of where they're putting them. And you're using Minnesota, and then you brought up Baltimore there. Maybe this is just the old school in me, but in that piece, Ellis, I think he made reference to Rutschman, if I remember correctly. He made reference to one of their young kids. And Henderson, that's who it was, thank you. He basically was like, hey, Henderson, he really used this machine. See, Henderson, basically acting as if Gunnar Henderson, who is one of the best baseball players in the world right now, was not going to be that guy if he didn't come up through the system and have that technology. Hey, man, maybe it's the old school in me. You can either play or you can't. And, sir, some of this stuff will help you get better. Is it going to get you from being basically, and again, I'm reading the tea leaves more than anything else. He didn't attach that name to this technology without a reason, right? Like he wasn't going to go, yeah, see our like 26 man on the roster. Yeah, he's here because of our technology. That's not a good sell.
A lot of the time, though, that's what it is. It's finding, agreed, but a lot of the time it's, hey, we found a fifth starter because of this. Like, we were able to develop a guy that ended up becoming a really solid mid-inning reliever for us. That was really important over time, but, would have never found him if not for this. Kyle Leahy is an example of that. Like, he has basically built it, and this is not a great thing for the Cardinals.
We're selling in on this?
But he has built, like, the technology, some apps for the Cardinals. It's how he got into the organization. And then they saw, hey, this guy can throw, and his stuff started to play, and he's utilizing the technology accordingly. And they've been able to find what is now a nice middle inning reliever, cheap, cost controlled, and can help them over the long haul. But a lot of the time, that's what it produces, is those, like, the connective tissue of your baseball team. A lot of the superstars were kind of born as being superstars. Gunnar Henderson, they said in the piece, that he overhauled his swing. So maybe there were some mechanical adjustments that were necessary. I don't know how to respond to this, because I do think sometimes, like, okay, yes, you captured that because of the technology, but 30 years ago, wouldn't you have just had some kind of coordinator that was going through the system? And I don't know if they would have captured it or not, but wouldn't they have just said, like, hey, keep that hip in, tuck that hip?
Yeah.
You're coming open too quick. Like, it just would have been different terminology. Instead of being so scientific the way that it is now, it would just been, hey, here's 3 tips. Figure this out. You'll be fine.
And to your point of, like, how much does it actually improve those guys? Like, sure,
Lutos, by the way, not Leahy. My bad.
Oh, yeah, Lutos. Yeah,
we really saw how impactful he was because we remembered.
But to your point, like, is Gunnar Henderson the player he is today? Did that technology make him 10% better? How much did that technology actually help him? And the organizations are all going to tell you this was huge for both Henderson, for the 26 man on the roster. Lutos wasn't going to be a guy that made AAA if not for this technology.
He did get 2 innings.
I am shocked by that. I have no recollection of those 2 innings.
He got that job in the 40-man roster spot because he created the technology.
But that's just where, like, I find this to be such a... I do think some of it is true, that, hey, you do need this technology, especially in modern baseball. I just think it's such an easy sell, and people are all in on it. And why does every organization now saying this at the GM meetings now? It's not just because Derrick Gould's asking about it. It's because they all want to do it now. It's the new trend. It's not the rebuild phase that every team convinced fans on that this is a good thing, that we need to suffer for 7 years. It's, no, just don't worry about the big league club. Forget that we cut 25, or in the Cardinals case, $60 million in payroll. Look at the minor leagues. They are going to be able to develop some talent right now, because look at that beautiful machine down there that's tracking guys' shape of the baseball.
The motion capturing machine. The more we're talking about this, the more it feels like it's these mid-market teams that are using this. It's just like it's the blanket over the fire of, we don't have the money to spend for these top players, and frankly, we can't get these top players. So let's throw the blanket over the fire and hope it goes out. So go, hey, we're building our minor league system. But the problem is when the flame ignites that blanket, what are you going to fall back on now? Because now you've used the whole, hey, well, we're going to invest in our minor league system. But if you can't identify talent, now where do you go?
That's the case no matter what. And this is where I will push back a little bit. I think this is the right way to go about it. Like, I think the Cardinals are doing this right.
I think it's the only way they can go about it.
Yeah. I think it took them way too long to get here. They needed to reinvest. They're way behind what other teams are doing. You have to keep up with the Joneses. I don't know if this will produce 5 pitchers, 20 pitchers, 30 pitchers, or no pitchers over the next 10 years. I have no idea. I don't know how anybody could possibly know. It's going to produce something, though, because it is another tool in your tool belt that you didn't previously have. Alex, you're a golfer. Mm-hmm. If you went to the golf course and it was, you're playing a par 5, you don't have a driver. It's problematic, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
You need that club in your bag. You want the opportunity to use multiple clubs when you go out to the golf course. You may not need all of them in any given day, depending on the course, depending on how you play, but you're going to, over time, need them. The Cardinals, there was a point in time where they didn't need this club. 20 years ago, it wasn't necessary because other teams in Major League Baseball weren't doing it. Now it is. And you need to be able to utilize it when it's necessary. It's not going to be for every player. There's going to be a lot of guys that just say, I don't want that stuff. I'm a see-ball, hit-ball guy. Cool, let's cater to you. There will be a lot of other players, though, especially on the pitching side of things, where you've fallen massively behind, where they're going to come to you and be like, hey, what can I do to make my slider more effective? Well, that's a great question. Here we go. Here's our video. Here's our video camera that we can use to be able to break down every millisecond of what the ball does after you release it and how we can get the best shape on that and how then it can play off of your sinker or your four-seam fastball. And here's a cutter that we can utilize for you as well. And if we have those 3 pitches working off one another, it's going to become a better combination for you, more effective combination than what you had been doing previously. All that to say, a lot of it is scouting stuff. It's just more scientific. So having that tool is going to be helpful for the Cardinals, and it's shocking that it took them this long to get there, but I think it's the right move. And I don't know that, to your point, Alex, I don't know that there was any other alternative. You had to go down this direction at some point. The thing that I think gets frustrating for Cardinals fans is they're framing it as they had to stop spending at the major league level in order to do this. I think that's just flat out not true. They're combining two things that shouldn't be combined. They're not spending at the major league level because their revenues are going down. That's it. That's why. Because they're scared of their RSNs, which is totally understandable. And they don't know how much money they're going to make next year via RSN or tickets because the team isn't going to be very good. And what they're selling you on is, well, we have to do this reinvestment in our minor league system. I think that's what becomes frustrating is they're not being honest. Just tell me the truth, man. You got less revenue? We get it. You got to spend a little bit less. All of us have that in our own personal lives. He's Alex's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, let's get into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is at Victory Men's Health. Check them out today, victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. Maybe you've got some weight loss goals, and you're thinking, you know what? For my New Year's resolution this year, we're less than 2 months away. I'm going to lose a little bit of weight. Why don't you get an early start on that? Go ahead and book your appointment today. victorymenshealth.com is the place to go, and when you go over there in the top right corner, super easy. Click book now, put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you and tell them a little bit about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. They can help you out over there at Victory Men's Health. Whether it's weight loss goals, low testosterone, maybe you're feeling a little sluggish, you don't have the same amount of energy that you once did, you're not getting the same out of your workouts, they can check for that with your first appointment. They'll do a full lab draw kit to find out exactly where you stand with your testosterone levels, erectile dysfunction. They can help you out with that as well. Many different things, red light therapy programs as well. Learn about it all at victorymenshealth.com. It's Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. Alex, I saw something tweeted out yesterday. This comes from Hayden Winks, who hosts a podcast for Underdog. T-Bone's boys over at Underdog.
Use the promo code BKF.
Oh, thanks, man.
BKF?
Yeah.
Like, what's that
Underdog.
stand for?
I guess BK and Ferrario. It's kind of awkward. Not gonna lie.
Kinda.
Yeah, T-Bone here. Use my promo code BKF for BK and Ferrario.
Love using Underdog. They do good stuff over there. I do their best ball before the season. I enjoy their playoff formats as well
best
during the
ball
regular
team.
season. It's fun.
Not the best.
No.
So I listened to their podcast. He tweeted something out last night that I found to be really interesting. And this is really about media. I want to make that very clear. That's what this is going to be about. Said long-form podcasts are the key to the electorate. Good for the future of every candidate that does multi-hour interviews without interruptions, unlike debates. It is wild, though, that comedians and sports podcasts seem to be at the forefront of that. Do you guys think we're shifting towards that? Just in general, of instead of it being like our show where we do 12-minute segments, we are seeing more and more of the listenership, the viewership are craving these longer, like meandering conversations that are not interrupted every 7 minutes or whatever by commercials. Is that something that you guys are feeling as well in your own personal life?
I mean, you're seeing the success of it, but like personal life, yes, if it's the right interview, because sometimes I think those interviews when you go hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's what you said. You're just kind of rambling more than anything. Like, if it's a podcast that gets to the point and it's a conversation and you ask the right questions, like if it's an hour, I'm willing to listen. But sometimes you hear what you want to hear and then you tune out for the remainder of the podcast. So you tune into something and 45 minutes in, it's answering the questions that you're curious about. And then for the next hour and a half, it's like just a bunch of BSing. So I personally don't feel like those 2.5 hour podcasts I gravitate towards. I like the stuff that's concise and gets to the point quick enough to where maybe not so much where it's interrupted like a show where you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes and then you got 3 minutes and then you're waiting to get back to it. But if it's like a 45-minute podcast or something that I can listen to while I'm in the car or while I'm trying to get something done.
See, I find myself, I used to not be where I would like an hour and a half, 2 hour long podcast. I actually find myself enjoying them more. And I think the reason for it is, one, first off, why am I there for a 2 hour conversation? Because I enjoy the content.
Sure.
And that's the most important thing is the content. But two, like to your point on like the breaks, there's breaks in there. You know what you get to do? You get to skip past them.
Yeah.
It's like commercials when like TiVo
Don't tell people
was
that.
brand
Actually,
new.
please listen to the advertising.
Oh, it's a podcast, man. It's fine.
but that's
Only
the thing,
listen to the one BK Ferrario podcast.
That's the thing that why I enjoy them the most is, there is no like 4 minute
what
long
TiVo was.
commercial breaks. That exactly is sure they're there. They put in their ad spots. They get the ad revenue for it. Does the podcaster? But I can go skip, and then I'm off back to the content. And that's what I think now is where I'm at the point where, man, I actually enjoy the hour-long conversation now a little bit more.
I'm the same way. Anything over like an hour and a half, it's just, I don't have the time for it, and it becomes difficult for me.
But if it's good, you'll go 2 days and do it.
Sure, but a lot of the time things are timely, and by the time that I get back to it, Alex, having kids, like, you never know when you're going to have the time to be able to go back and listen to that
And you forget what you listened to originally, and you're like, what do I got to go back to?
That's where it becomes difficult. Anything over about an hour and a half is, in my opinion, too long.
I'm with you.
But if I've got under an hour and a half, and I've got a long conversation between people, it's become my preference. And I do wonder what that means for the future of what we do, for the future of like mainstream media, because so much of this is all changing right now, and it's changing all so fast. And the advertising side of things is changing, and it's shifting in ways that we can't foresee. And I just am fascinated by what this is going to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now.
The hard part,
I don't know the answer to that, because like you just said, what do you do when you listen to podcasts when the advertising comes on?
Skip.
If I'm an advertiser, am I going to spend the same amount of money on that as I would for this? No, I'm not. So that's where it gets very difficult is, okay, so you're right. It's better for the listeners, but does it become better for the content producers? No, you have to really upscale what it is. So people like Joe Rogan or Bill Simmons, like they can make a ton of money because they have such huge listenerships. But the vast majority of these podcasts aren't making that kind of money. And it takes so long and requires such a breakthrough to be able to get there. I don't know what that means for, like, it almost feels like there will be like 20 podcasts down the road that make all of this money, and then I don't know what ends up surviving beyond that.
are there analytics that show if people skip the podcast at any point?
It shows typically the time spent listening.
Yeah. So like you could look at we'll just use an hour-long podcast, for example. My guess is if you see like a hour-long podcast and someone listened for like, let's just say 50 minutes, odds are they skipped through something. And the odds are they probably didn't just quit at like 10 minutes left to go.
Before it's over, you skip
Odds
the 10
are it probably
minutes.
tells me they skipped commercials in during those podcast
The hard part with all of it too is it feels like, I mean, you're not trying to capture one set of audience, because like Tebow mentioned, like if I'm going to listen to an interview, it's because I want to listen to that. That's who you're putting that out there for. But man, with podcasts, it's like you're putting it out there, but you also have to capture this group of people, but then you want this audience as well. You're trying to grab like 17 different audiences at once, whereas in live radio, you're just hoping that they all kind of gravitate toward it while you're sitting in the car.
Why do you think that's different?
For podcasts, it feels like you put the podcast together because you're targeting one group of fans that you expect to just always listen to a new episode that drops. But the way to get more and more downloads is putting a wider net out there to try and grab different types of audience members.
I feel the opposite about it. I think podcasts are hyper niche because of that. Because I know people are listening to my podcast for this. Like if I put out a Cardinals podcast, I'm just talking about Cardinals every day. Yeah. If I put out a Blues podcast, I'm just talking about the Blues every day. If I'm putting out a politics podcast, whatever the biggest politics news is, I'm talking about that every single day, or however often you put out the podcast. Like what we do is the opposite. We are actually casting that wide net. Just go behind the curtain for a second. Like the greatest number of people that we can get when we talk on the radio every day is the Cardinals. We've done research on this. The most people in St. Louis care about the Cardinals, and then it's the Blues, and then beyond that, it's basically everything else, but NFL, college football, etc. And so the reason why we talk about the Cardinals as much as we do is because so many people listen for that, and it's not segmented. When we talk about college football, we talk about Mizzou, there's a certain segment of our audience that's like T-Bone, and if you were a listener and not on the show, be like, yeah, beep, I'm going to go to a different station. I don't care about Mizzou. I care about Illinois. That's my squad. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see what this means for everything as we go along here. And I mean, the election is just one example of this where you do see the candidates now going to these podcasts that are sports or entertainment driven, and they end up being on them for an hour and a half. That never happened 15 years ago. And now it's becoming a huge piece of it. I mean, last night, like, it was mentioned in the acceptance speech, bussin' with the boys.
Bussin' with the boys.
Taylor Lewan.
Never thought I would have heard that.
I would have never expected that one.
It's crazy, man. The way the things are going is just, it's an ever-changing industry, and I'm fascinated by it. So I was curious what our audience thinks on that. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. All right, coming up next, Jordan Kyrou is having a heck of a season despite the points maybe not being there the way that we would hope. T-Bone thinks he's pinpointed the moment when things changed for him. I'll tell you what that was next year on 101 ESPN. All right, so Jordan Binnington looks excellent this year. Jordan Kyrou also looks excellent this year. And if you think that I did that on purpose, you think I'm much better at this than I actually am. That was 100% an accident.
You looked at the wrong segment, didn't you?
So Jordan Kyrou, I think, has been playing some of his best hockey so far this year. He's more well-rounded. The points maybe aren't quite what you thought they were going to be coming into the season, but they're starting to come around. Goals in back-to-back games now. Alex, T-Bone said something to us before the show today. I was like, you know what? It's a really interesting point. I want you to bring that on the air. T-Bone, what do you think when you try to pinpoint the moment where things changed for Kyrou? What do you look back on?
I think a lot of people will look back on, oh, it was an off-season, right? There was the off-season. Finally, the message got through. I don't even know if the message got through from the Blues personnel. I do think Bannister's connecting with him better than what maybe Craig Berube did. But I think the spot that I'm curious, and I wonder if it is the spot that really kind of changed things for Jordan Kyrou, is you go back to the Craig Berube firing. Remember, you have the Craig Berube firing. It's a giant deal here in St. Louis. Craig Berube beloved here in St. Louis. And you have that day of or day after, I think it was the day after, the Blues have their first practice with Drew Bannister. I don't even think Drew Bannister was in attendance. He was flying into St. Louis. And Kyrou just suddenly gets asked by our Blues insider, JR, something about Berube. And he gives a comment that just did not resonate with the fans. And the entire game, he gets booed on home ice. Booed on home ice, and not just like his first shift. The entire game. Every time the puck's on Jordan Kyrou's stick, he gets booed. And I remember saying at the time of, this needs to be the moment it clicks for Jordan Kyrou. This needs to be the moment where you take your game to the next level, or at least start to kind of take away some of those warts that fans can look back on of, hey, he's not giving effort on some of these plays. He's not skating back. And I think from that point on, I remember the next game he scored a goal, if I remember correctly. Scored a goal after the game in which he got booed on home ice. And I thought he played pretty well down the stretch last season.
Not only scored a goal, had 2 assists as well.
Yeah, he was a point-per-game player and was a -6 prior to Berube being fired. That Detroit game where he turned the puck over, and then before he made the comment, 17 points in 28 games, it was a -9.
Yeah, so the plus-minus isn't necessarily there for him, but it's
better.
It's better.
18 points prior to, and then 18 points in 29 games prior to the game when he had those comments, and he cried afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And then 49 points in 53 games after.
Like, right there. To me, like, he started to play better hockey, and now this season we're seeing a more complete game. And I thought you saw more of a complete game last year. Even during Berube, I thought there were times he still played better, more of a complete game for the St. Louis Blues. But I just wonder if that's the moment when it clicked. It was, hey, you know what? I'm not the biggest, baddest guy in town. Or, you know what? I'm going to take it to the fan base. They just booed me on home ice. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to try and win back over the fan base with my play. Now, I don't know if he'll ever be able to do that. But I just wonder if that was the moment where it was, you know what, F it. You know, I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to go do my thing, and I'm also going to be more of a team player. I think that was the moment as well where it clicked of, you know what, what's Bannister raved about him for this year? Hasn't really been his offense. There's been times where he's talked about where he's taking over games. I've heard him rave multiple times about him playing a team game, and I never heard that about Kyrou prior to Drew Bannister this year. So I just wonder if that's the moment where maybe it's not. Maybe it was something in the offseason that he did, but I wonder if I can circle back when we look back on Kyrou's career, whether it be 5 years from now, a month from now, and he's still playing good hockey. I wonder if the moment where he got booed on home ice was the moment where it really clicked for him.
I don't think you're far off on that, and I would tie in. I would bet that moment where you were booed and you were crying on post game because of being booed, and then I have to imagine a group of guys who were so tight with Craig Berube take Jordan Kyrou aside and say, look, man, there's got to be some type of change here. That's Kyrou. That's also the players taking him and saying, like, there's got to be an adjustment with your game because you're in control of this career. Because one thing that has been very noticeable, despite the up and down points and plus minus this season, Kerbs referenced this yesterday on the broadcast, like, on that previous road trip, he was staying on the ice and one of the last guys off of the ice almost every single game. Mm-hmm. And you don't just all of a sudden snap your fingers and say, hey, I'm going to be the first one on the ice. Because in years past, we've spent time talking about, optional skate, Kyrou's not out there.
I was just about to bring that up. I'm glad I didn't interrupt you. I
appreciate it, though. That was very polite of you. But when at some point you have a eye-opening moment, and I do think you're spot on, T-Bone. Berube getting fired wasn't it. It was the comments he made and then the booing afterwards. But I also think that comes down to a player grabbing him or players taking him aside and saying, look, dude, I know you understand what just took place, but you've got to come to the realization that there will be no success with your career here unless you take this and run with it.
And real quick, I do remember, now that you bring that up, I remember the day that Burby was fired, or the day after Burby was fired. We were at Centene for the press conference, right? And I went to the locker room afterwards, or after their practice, and it was before the Kyrou comment or non-comment, whatever it was. And I remember, I think it was Jordan Binnington, and I'm not saying Binnington was the guy that talked to Kyrou. I wouldn't doubt if players did say something to him, but I remember Binnington specifically saying, you either buy into Blues hockey or you get out.
100%.
And that's the moment where I wonder if players did say something to Kyrou, and then you have the booing on home ice. I wonder if that is where it kind of clicks for him.
I also think he might have just had a bleep it moment.
Yeah.
I remember during the postseason, it was one of the viral moments, right? Kike Hernandez asked post-game by Ken Rosenthal, hey, Kike, what's different about this Dodgers team? I think it was in the NLCS, if I'm not mistaken, when they had advanced to the World Series.
Yeah.
He said, are we live? Ken said, yeah, we are. He said, we don't give a bleep.
Ken Rosenthal was like, oh, crap.
And
I should have said no.
in that moment, it's a lot of people were like, oh, so stupid. I think it revealed a lot about the mindset of this Dodgers team. I really do, man. And I think there's some of that right now in Jordan Kyrou's game. I think he's playing, it's strange to say this because he's more structured on the ice, I do believe. I think he's also playing a little more free, where he's less afraid to make a mistake. And he's just saying, let's just go, I'm going to go be me. And if that means that I get into trouble, so be it. But I'm going to go out there and play the best version of my game possible within the structure of what the Blues are doing, which is a super important clarification there. And it's working. I don't know how long this can work. I don't know how long it'll sustain. Maybe a week from now, we're talking once again about, hey, Kyrou needs to play a better all-around game. But we've now seen it for 65 games consecutively, essentially, where he is a close to point-per-game player in that time. He has 30 goals in his last 66 games. That's a 40-goal pace, man. That's what we all want Jordan Kyrou to become. And I don't believe a coincidence that it's taken place since the moment that you pinpointed.
And here's the thing, too. Like, he's going into puck battles now. And, guys, for the longest time, Jordan Kyrou refused to go into puck battles. That Tampa Bay Lightning game, he would be on the forecheck in the middle of two defensemen trying to retrieve a puck. And that's not what Jordan Kyrou does. The team game that Drew Bannister has referenced, it feels different than what Jordan Kyrou has done in the past, because what Jordan Kyrou has done in the past is consistently what happened in that Montreal or the Philadelphia Flyers game, to where you have the puck in the neutral zone, you say, I could do this myself. But instead, Tampa Bay Lightning game, where I think he played close to 16 minutes in that one, nothing's there, you dump the puck in. And that's just not been his mentality. It just does feel like something shifted for this team. And maybe it's the fact that you don't have Robert Thomas, you don't have Philip Broberg. A lot of these top players aren't there, and Jordan Kyrou is kind of thrusted into this star role now without these players. But going from a Berube firing to crying, and then when you're right, Binnington makes comments, Schenn makes comments, and you're thinking, okay, something's got to shift here. He has just been a different player from start to finish and off of the ice, which you have to give him credit for, but you also give credit to Drew Bannister for finding some ability to untap that potential in Jordan Kyrou.
Anecdotally, in our conversations with him, he also seemed more open this year than he has at any point previously when we've had conversations with him. Yeah. He felt more comfortable in his own shoes. I don't know how much that matters, but it's not zero. It's not nothing. All right, coming up in 10 minutes, Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joins us. But next, I think we can probably cross at least one team off the Nolan Arenado sweepstakes. We'll talk about who that is next here on 101 ESPN.
You're probably like I have been over these last 24 hours and stressing out about the basement because of the flooding and all of the rain that came down and thinking, how are we going to handle this? Well, luckily, I have Tracy Bibb as my insurance agent because with issues like that, with flooding, with whatever goes wrong with your home, you're able to give her a call and solve the problem immediately. I've told this story before. I think it was about a year ago. My brother-in-law, their basement flooded, called their insurance, did not hear back for an entire week. I can't even imagine sitting around wondering what to do with your basement without any answers like that. But luckily, when we've had the issue, you call Tracy, you get the answers, and you find a solution immediately. That's great customer service. And that's your insurance agent that you have a relationship with, which I imagine a lot of people don't even know who their insurance agent is. But Tracy Bibb is always there for you. Also, making sure that she's getting you the most competitive rates and saving you money. Give her a call today. Tell her you heard me talk about it on 101 ESPN. She'll walk you through a free non-committal quote. Super simple. All you got to do is call her. 314-328-4260. Once again, that's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, I think we can cross one team off of the sweepstakes for Nolan Arenado, Alex. I don't think he's going to Houston. There was a couple updates yesterday with the Houston Astros general manager, and he said effectively, Alex Bregman's coming back. We don't have the deal done yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, and there's a bunch of different things. I's to dot, T's to cross.
Boy, it's going to be awkward when he signs with the Dodgers.
But the Astros feel confident that they will be able to retain their star third baseman, Alex Bregman. It makes sense. I wouldn't want him to walk either. They've let a bunch of stars walk over the years. Most of those have not ended up being good decisions. Really just the George Springer one has come back to be like, you probably made the right call there. But Carlos Correa, they could certainly use at this point. Alex, if you take the Astros out of the mix, and we don't know if Arenado would have even been interested in going to Houston. That's another factor in all of these discussions. Where do you think are the most likely landing spots for Arenado if he's dealt?
Dodgers. I mean, he's going to pick where he wants to play. And one, you have to be a team that can contend, which is why at least Houston was intriguing. You were closer, although I don't know how close you were to L.A., but you were on a team that had the shot to win a World Series. I really think if you're him, it would be the Dodgers or bust because you can't. I mean, the Angels, there's no bleeping way. And the Padres already have their third baseman. So I think right now, because Houston is off the table, unless Nolan Arenado just has this change of heart and wants to go be in a certain city, I think it's basically call the Dodgers and see if they want me. And if they don't, then I'll be back starting at third base for you next season.
Yeah, like Dodgers make the most sense because, again, he's got the tie that's there. And then, like, you look around, like, the reason it made sense for Houston was because of Bregman. If he's gone, they're probably going to want to try and fill that spot. Like, it's just hard to find other teams that would fit that. Would Washington have interest in him since they were kind of connected to it? Maybe. Would he want to go to Washington? That I'm skeptical of. Same with the Mets. If the Mets want to be big spenders, would they look at third base as potential for a spot? They've got Vientos, though, there, so I don't know if they would take on the contract of Nolan Arenado. I mean, Vientos was 35% above league average, so they're probably out in that case. I don't know who now he goes to because the Astros made the most sense because of what we talked about with Bregman, and I could totally see where they would make that kind of a move. I don't know if the Dodgers will do it. If I'm the Dodgers, I can either have Max Muncy at third base, who's not great defensively, but arguably a better hitter, and maybe most importantly, left-handed. And we see why people love left-handed bats in October. It's because right-handed pitching is so dominant. There's more righties when you get to October. There's more righties in baseball, period. If I'm them, I would just hold on to him rather than take on the contract of Nolan Arenado.
And you know what the Dodgers have also with Muncy over Arenado? You got a lot of versatile players to where you could use a Kike Hernandez there. You could use a Tommy Edman there for a short sample size. If you've got Nolan Arenado, you got one spot to play him, and it's third base. Because he can't hit DH because of Shohei Ohtani. You're not moving him to another position. So it's, hey, you're third base, and now where's the versatility come in?
Yeah, I think that's okay because he's so good defensively over there at third, and so you can then utilize Tommy Edman wherever you want to. I think they could make it work in L.A., but like, what do you do with Muncy in that scenario? Because he's probably not playing second because that's where Gavin Lux goes. He's definitely not playing first because they've got this Freddie Freeman guy, and I've heard he's pretty good at that. Like you said, DH is occupied by Shohei Ohtani, and Max Muncy's too good of a player to not have in your everyday lineup. I don't think you want him playing regularly in the outfield. That's not a situation for Max Muncy. So I think the Dodgers, while they do make some sense for Arenado, it just becomes a really difficult picture to understand how he fits their plans. And then when you're thinking, okay, we're going to add this player that we don't really have an obvious plan for, and he's $27 million a year for the next couple of years, and he's shown serious signs of decline, it just becomes difficult for me to understand an organization that is run as well as the Dodgers are. Is that really the move that they're going to make? I don't know. I think a year or two ago they would have. I'm not sure that they will as of today. I feel like the Yankees might be the most likely landing spot.
Oh, really? Because I don't think the Yankees are a spot at all.
And I don't think
and the reason for it is
I think there's one thing that would have to happen.
they miss out on Soto.
Correct.
See, and maybe that is the route where it ends up going. I just expect they're going to sign Soto. And maybe I'm doing the fool's gold here, but they don't want to go past that third luxury tax. It was reported today, the Cohen tax.
Well.
So, like, if they get Soto, so then you're out of it. And the whole reason they're even talking about even doing a, I guess, extension in air quotes with Garrett Cole is to bring down his luxury tax number so you can then bump up maybe the number for Soto.
Maybe it's whoever misses out on Soto in New York, that's probably the most likely landing spot. It just becomes really difficult. The Blue Jays are talking about potentially moving Vladimir Guerrero Jr. back to third base. Well, if that happens, they're not an option for you. There's just not a lot of teams that are spending money that would be willing to take on $25 million for an aging veteran at third base. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know who that team would be. Most of the teams across Major League Baseball either already have a third baseman or don't want to take on that kind of money. Maybe Philly?
That's who I was just looking up. Like, would the Phillies be willing to do this?
But they have Bohm there?
They had Bohm, but he was 17% above league average.
Again, I don't think so, but we know how Dombrowski is. He collects stars, so maybe he just says, hey, we're going to get amazing defense at third base. Maybe you move Bohm to second. They weren't super thrilled with what Stock gave them there. Maybe you move, there's other things you can do, but is that really a move that you're doing to move a younger player that's going to be with you for the long-term future? I don't know.
And the thing is, I don't know if Nolan Arenado wants to go to those places. I mean, if he's like California-focused or bust, you've already got your family settled with St. Louis. Do you really want to uproot and go to the Yankees where potentially it's a good spot, but then maybe you're in the same spot 2 years from now that want to move around? Like, it does feel a little like the Torrey Krug situation to where, like, they had the opportunity and Torrey Krug essentially said, look, my family's based here. I don't want to get traded somewhere and then get traded again. Arenado might look at this as like, look, send me home or I'm staying in St. Louis until this contract is done.
I wonder if Arizona would consider it.
I don't know if they'll take that big a swing. And they had a weird. They picked up Suarez's option. He's kind of now his defense. Yikes.
Maybe they consider moving him to DH occasionally.
Maybe. I mean, but that would be like they're already going to be near top of their payroll numbers. I mean, if he would be willing to play first, Suarez maybe, but because like they're going to lose Christian Walker probably. So maybe that is the path towards it. But even then, I would be shocked if they take on that big a contract.
It just gets very difficult. And this is why when you're thinking about what the Cardinals could do potentially this offseason, that no trade clause changes things. And the money that he's owed changes things for a lot of teams. It becomes difficult to trade him. It makes you wonder, okay, do they go towards another guy? I think Nolan Arenado is probably the most likely one that would be open to leaving until you make a move. I don't know. It's difficult. Houston was the clearest path. They've got the money. They've got the spot that's available if Bregman decides to leave. So if you're a Cardinals fan, you want Arenado out, I would be rooting for Alex Bregman to sign with the Washington Nationals. That's probably the cleanest fit for both sides as long as, again, Nolan Arenado is willing to go to and live in Houston. With Alex T-Bone, I'm BK. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, look, when you go to classicaircare.com, right on the top, right at the very top, number one, they've got a link that says we are hiring. So if you are looking for a job in the heating and cooling business, they are hiring. You can work for a company that cares about its employees. You can work for a company that treats its employees like you should treat an employee, because they know that if they treat the employees right, that then trickles down to the customer. You can also, right on that top part of the website at classicaircare.com, find all the reviews Then read the amazing thousands of reviews. They've got a 4.8 Google rating. And then also on that top bar, you can shop for filters. You can get air filters delivered to your house so you don't have to worry about it. It's all at ClassicAirCare.com. You can book an appointment online. I've got them coming to the house in about a week and a half to do a maintenance look at my unit to make sure it's ready for the winter so I don't have to worry about it when it is when I'm traveling out of town and I want to make sure the family is set at home. It's Classic Air Care. Go to ClassicAirCare.com. You can take care of all of it online. You can also call them. The number's up there, too, if you're like me and just like to talk to a live person. But it's all at ClassicAirCare.com. They're making your life more comfortable for all your heating and cooling needs.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last night 3-2. They are off today before they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they take on the Utah Hockey Club. Pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. The Joey will join the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber, for Puck Drop at 7, and Kerbs joins us next here on BK and Ferrario. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alex, we're going to get to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, here on 101 ESPN in just a moment. He's going to join us via the Callier and Thompson hotline. But first, I want to read you a couple of these Scott Boras quotes from down at the general manager meetings.
Didn't know today was Boras Day.
Today is indeed Boras Day, and you guys always know this is a day that is after Alex's heart. On Alex Bregman, quote, he provided the Astros with that infusion of championship blood. Everything about him is AB positive.
Nice. Nice. Way to go. That's a dad joke right there. High five, everybody.
On Blake Snell, the Snelling salts have created a lot of whiffs. The market has definitely awakened to Blake Snell. On Corbin Burns, he continues to be a Corbin copy of his previous seasons. He's the foundation of having a number one. Last one. You know who this is about. We hear a lot about the bear market for power hitting first basemen. For Pete's sake, it's the polar opposite.
I can see why teams hate dealing with him.
I like to picture somebody that works in the office for Scott Boras. It's like an intern.
Yeah, who do you think is writing
It's
this?
an intern, and like you get your job based off of if Scott Boras gets reaction off of these puns for his meetings. He reads them off of the note card and is like, nope, that one's terrible. Let's go to the next one. Nope, that one. No.
Cindy, give me the next pitch.
Tell Philip he's out of a job.
All right, we go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline now to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues, joining us here on 101 ESPN. Kerbs, how you doing today, man?
Brandon, doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. So the Blues win 3-2 last night. It was another gritty performance by this team. Kerbs are open today. You can question this team's talent. That's totally fair. I don't know where they're going to end at the end of the season, but I think at this point it is unfair to question their heart. It is unfair to question their toughness. This is a team that's going to fight.
I think that if there's a characteristic through 13 games of the season that I can clearly say is different this season versus last season, it is a team togetherness that I don't think has existed for a couple of years. Their willingness to stand up for each other, and they've shown it. Doesn't mean you've got to drop the gloves like Shannon Buchnevich did the other day. You've just got to make it a little bit nastier on the ice for the opposition, and that I think we've seen. We've seen that in several categories. We've seen that in several instances, and to me, that is a huge part in becoming a really solid team again. And look, I don't know how this season's going to end up either. There's a lot of injuries right now, obviously. It's a very nasty, difficult Central Division and Western Conference. Do they make the playoffs? Obviously, that's a goal. You hope that happens. But at the same time, I think that this team could be better this year than it was last year. I think it is. And they still have a chance to finish with fewer points, depending on how injuries and things shape up. So I don't have a crystal ball for the future. I do know that what I've seen so far is extremely encouraging in the right direction for this team.
Well, Kerb's one guy that, if he wasn't, he already solidified his spot as a part of the future is Dylan Holloway. Of course, the scary moment that happens last night, he leaves. I didn't expect to see him talk today at skate, but then he comes out with this quote saying that the puck hits him in a nerve where he felt a little off when he was on the ice, but he said, I can't get off of the ice because there's a 2-on-1 that I got to break up, and then I'll get off of the ice. You talk about team toughness. Dylan Holloway might have just resembled that for you in one game.
It's what you love about the game of hockey, right?
Yeah.
The puck hits him in the neck. He feels a little off. He realizes that the Blues have a 2-on-1, and so he jumps up into the offensive zone, circles back, has to go back, defend in his own end, and then comes back into the middle of the ice. And as he said, he doesn't even remember going over to the bench. I was thinking about this. I was sitting this morning, actually, when I was thinking about it, and knowing that Dylan was going to be fine and things are okay. After Jay Bouwmeester went down in Anaheim, of course, everything gets sorted out. They decide to postpone the rest of the game, all the stuff that people remember about that. The whole team was standing downstairs, broadcasters, players, everybody's just kind of figuring out, okay, what's going on? Because we were supposed to leave town after that game. And they decided to stay in town, and Richie Jankowski had to find a hotel that could house an entire team again. We were standing down there, and to this day, I'm extremely thankful of two dads, because remember that was the dad's trip. Mm-hmm. One was Mr. Shen, and the other was Mr. Bozak. All right, and the reason I say that is these two guys, and Mr. Shen being a volunteer, firefighter, right, and so they looked at us and go, guys, he's going to be fine. And I'll never forget Mr. Bozak looking right at us and going, my guess is by the time they got him to the ambulance, he was perfectly fine, was ready to play another shift. And it turns out that was exactly right. It was just some calming experience from older adults that have lived through some traumatic moments with people. And again, we're talking, just a few years ago, so you're talking me being 49 years old to another adult, then it still matters. And it was actually, I related that, went back to that moment and thought, okay, once they came out and said he's alert and fine and stable, they're just going to run some tests. You think, okay, I think he's going to be fine, and that's the good news, and I'll bet you he'll be back pretty quick. And so I'm thrilled and excited for him that could be the case.
Chris Kerber is joining us here on 101 ESPN. He's the voice of the Blues, of course, and you hear him on the call last night as the Blues get another win. Jordan Kyrou, Kerbs, had another good game in that one, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier today. It feels like we've seen a shift in Kyrou, and I know in your broadcast last night, in the post-game show, I think it was Joey, you said you've seen him mature a bit as a player. T-Bone pinpointed, I want to get your thoughts on this. The moment last year where he was booed on the ice, after the game, he has that tearful response, and then he goes on a tear the rest of the season. He had 26 goals and 49 points in the final 53 games. So far this year, 11 points in the first 13 games of the season. Prior to that moment, he had 18 points in the first 29 games, Kerbs. Are we going to look back at that? And obviously nobody wanted that to happen. It was a tough moment for everybody involved, but are we going to look back at that as a potential turning point for Jordan Kyrou and the player that he becomes?
As a potential turning point, I don't know. As one of the key growth factors as a player and a human being, I think you have to. And the reason I say that is I think we have this desire to kind of look for big moments, where, that it had to be this or it could be that. Honestly, I think at some point in time, now look, what I'm saying is I do think that is definitely part of the process, okay? I don't know where he was mentally when he said that. I don't know how aware he was afterwards, to be real honest with you. Although I do believe the emotional reaction we saw from him was genuine, and I believe that is an important factor, okay? But that said, I kind of see this with raising daughters. Like you just realize like there's a moment. Okay, this is the moment. Yep, that one was hard to get to. They're going to get it, and then a week later you're like, son of a gun, they didn't get it, right? And so, but then what you realize is over time there's other things. So I believe that was part of it. I believe the actual just firing of Craig Berube was part of it. I believe you got a young man that, as he was coming into his own and trying to become a pro, you were dealing with the 2 full seasons of COVID messed up scenarios, right? In key development moments. And then I actually believe that even this year, I believe that the players in the locker room, I believe that the captain and other guys have demanded accountability from their teammates. And I know for a fact that conversations have happened amongst different teammates, coaches, one-on-one. Like we saw it in Philadelphia. We saw Steve Ott, for 5 minutes after practice, just having a conversation with Jordan Kyrou. It's a continued part of the process. So is it one thing? No. Can you ignore anything and say it wasn't that? No, you can't. I just think it's all part of the process of divining how he's learning to think and how he's becoming. And I do believe, and we said this a couple of games ago, everyone's thinking, okay, hey, this is an opportunity for Bolduc or an opportunity for Neighbors or what happens with Robert Thomas out. I viewed this as an opportunity for Jordan Kyrou because they are going to have to rely on him as the top offensive player on this team. And I think he's not only done it from an offensive standpoint, but he has been impacting some games this season, even without scoring goals or picking up assists. That's the continued growth. So maybe a little long-winded there, BK, but I really do believe that it's a culmination of everything because I just don't know that it's one event that is enough to make that transition. I just think it's something that's coming over time, and you're starting to see him figure it out.
Turns out nuance is a worthwhile thing to have in our conversations about sports and other things. Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. He's the voice of the Blues. You'll hear him tomorrow on The Call. Blues versus the Utah Hockey Club. Pre-game coverage for that one starting tomorrow at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Curbs will have the call starting at 7. Appreciate the time, man. Talk to you again next week.
All right, how many my cousin Vinny's, the 2 Utes conversation do you think we throw out there tomorrow?
A lot of them. I love me some Mike
I
Cousin
set
Vinny.
the over-under at 4.5.
4.5. Okay, you know what? Well, all right. I'll see what I can do. Let me know which one you pick. I'll help you be a winner.
That'll be easy, Curbs. That'll be easy.
I need some help with my betting, so I appreciate that. It's Chris Kerber, voice of the
All right,
Blues.
guys.
Joins us each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. We'll put a bow on this thing with the Rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa, a St. Louis tradition since 1929. They've got that incredibly delicious frozen custard. It's rich, it's creamy texture, perfected recipe from a long-time family ingredient. 95 years, 4 generations of families taking care of St. Louis with that frozen custard. And you can make whatever flavors you want. They've got tons of them, hundreds of them, I should say. They've already got some specialty flavors prepared for you, though, like the twisted caramel. It's frozen custard with caramel pretzels and just the right amount of salt. You can get it as a sundae or a concrete. I'd urge you to buy it in the quart size, take it home with you, put it in the deep freeze, and have it for all of the holiday dinners that you're going to have coming up soon. While you're out there, get some holiday shopping done. Walk to the gift shop. It's across the parking lot on Chippewa. You can get some souvenirs. You can get apparel. You can buy gift cards, all of it for you at the Ted Drew's gift shop. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa. It really is good, guys and gals.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by...
Are you finished? Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Hear Alex make an ass of himself as he talks to me about my tone.
It was one of the moments. It was one of the few moments that I realized, like, oh, that sounded a lot worse than when I actually said it in my head.
We don't have many of those moments on the air where, like, one of us gets, like, legitimately upset at the other. Doesn't happen very often. It's happened, don't get me wrong. And normally it's Alex getting upset with me, which is deserved. I have that effect on people. This was one, and it's really rare that this happened, where I had to look to T-Bone and be like, are we going to be okay here? Should I throw it to break?
My reaction was, dude, don't look at me.
I did see T-Bone.
You laid your own bed, man. I'm over here doing my own thing.
I was surprised T-Bone didn't have whiplash or hurt his neck when he flung his head around as fast as he did.
Because I was shocked. I've heard you get angry. I've never heard you basically shut him up.
Yeah.
And his expression was...
I might actually go back and screen grab that. I need a new screensaver for my phone.
It was the kid that, like, for the first time pushes back against the bully.
Yeah.
And the bully's like, whoa. I was unprepared for that. That was me. And that's, I mean, if you have no idea what we're talking about right now, the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. The app is presented by the Schaefer Door Company. Podcast page presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. All right, Alex. So big story today is the Blues getting the win last night. It is worth noting Dylan Holloway was at practice today, was not skating because he has to be off the ice for 24 hours. Yes. But would have loved to have been out there. It sounds like there's at least a possibility that he's playing for the Blues again tomorrow. So thank God that scary scene didn't amount to anything more serious. That being said, I do want to discuss the game with you here for a second. What did you take from that one, Alex? What did you learn about the Blues with their performance last night?
That this team has found an ability to fight back. And it's a personality that I didn't know if they had the right players on their roster to do it. Last year, you could have asked me if this team was going to figure it out with this core, and I probably would have said no, because I thought guys like Jordan Kyrou, guys like Justin Falk, Colton Parayko, Nick Leddy, I didn't think they had the ability to push back. And I was wondering if until you get the new players acclimated, that's when you get that fight. You've seen it in 13 games. With the exception of the Ottawa Senators game, they've had the chance to come back in every single one of them. We looked at it. They're tied for first. There's two other teams that have the same amount of comebacks as the Blues do. It's Edmonton and it's the Winnipeg Jets. This team, in terms of the mentality on the ice, is always in hockey games because they are confident and because they can fight back, and they've got just a camaraderie to themselves and the physical presence that if somebody tries to kind of get underneath their skin or take an extra hack at their goaltender, they're going to step up immediately, and they did not do that for the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. You look at some of the additions that they added in this offseason. Matthew Joseph hasn't been playing right now, but he's a guy that had a lot of that. And Ryan Suter last night, you saw that, standing up the dude, trying to get into the offensive zone of the blue line. Just some of the plays that they're making right now don't get made. A year, 2 years ago, it looks like a different team. It feels like a different team. I don't know what that means in the bottom line at the end of the season, but watching them night to night is just a more enjoyable experience. Yeah. He's Alex Ferrario. That is Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll have more on the Blues tomorrow, plus talk a little bit about the Cardinals as well. Plenty of sports conversations. We're your home for that right here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, it's the Fast Lane here on 101 ESPN.
Jordan Binnington is always meticulous in his decisions, and I think part of the reason...
I think the emotions eventually caught up with him.
Can I finish?
Ooh.